Hello, and welcome to Not My Podcast in place of my usual podcast this Tuesday night. I think I'm going to do this more regularly, but I've invited on a guest to discuss one controversial topic inside the distant sphere or the distant right sphere generally. Hopefully, I've made this a mission of my channel for the last years to kind of identify long-standing controversies and to try to resolve them or to try to make it obvious where the disagreement is, what people believe, so that there isn't this constant misunderstanding and the ability to kind of use these differences of ideology to create divisions and drama, which I think are ultimately destructive. But I'd like to welcome on the channel Redhawk.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Dave. I'm glad we're finally having this discussion.
Yeah. So Redhawk, I know you from Twitter more than I know. You think you have a YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, yeah, and you were also in a Substack as well?
Yes.
Excellent. So yeah, I think I'm actually subscribed to the Substack, but I know you from Substack and Twitter, and you also have a YouTube channel. And I believe I met you at the conference last year, and I knew that. Well, actually, maybe you should explain your ideology a little bit, because I don't want to mischaracterize it, and that's sort of why we're here, is to discuss these things.
Sure, no problem. So, first, the correction I'll make is, I guess we'll say on ideological grounds, I am of like the dissident right sphere, whatever you like. I mean, free market economics. I'm leaning towards more on the monarchy side of things now these days. But as it relates to the intersexual dynamic stuff that I normally talk about, I would like to stress at the front that it's not an ideology. It's a praxeology, a set of tools, in the sense of it's not a 12 rules for life or a code of ethics or morality to live by. It absolutely is not that. And this is a point of contention I have with other people in whatever you want to call the manosphere, red pill community, whatever people are using the term as today, who are trying to morph it into some kind of moral code or ideology or whatever you have. So I strictly try and limit it to the praxis as much as possible, because I think that is where the actual information is most useful to guys is.
Yeah. So this is called red pill ideology, or I always associate this with pickup artist type communities.
Yeah, it's certainly a part of it. Yes.
Yeah, and I should say that like this is. Obviously the distant right and the right wing are very old phenomenons in the real world, but online at least the manosphere, and I'm thinking of a few blogs in particular like Chateau Hartiste or whatever, were incredibly important in the popularization of sort of what I would call deep right ideology. Like a lot of people actually, I've told, I was not one of these people, a lot of people found, say, unqualified reservations through like manosphere blogs. But then,
there definitely is a pipeline from, red pill manosphere stuff into more of the dissident right circles. It absolutely is the case. And I think this largely comes from, the first lie that men are always taught is about the nature of women and the nature of themselves. And when they find out they've been lied to about this thing, it gets them questioning, oh, well, what other things has the regime lied to me about? And so it's a very quick, fast track way for them to come into more, hard right topics.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I think I read both blogs back in the day. I had this very wide range of reading different kinds of blogs, and so this was back in like right around the time I converted to Catholicism, or just before then. But then I kind of lost track of where those blogs went. And I should say, for most people, that was sort of the primary anti-progressive force from 2014 to 2016. Them and like the MGTOW people, and the incel was kind of not really a thing yet. But then like also the men's, remember MRA? Remember how big that was?
With like Paul Elam and stuff like that. And he
was and the girl rights wide and all those people, like that was huge. And then around 2017 that all evaporated, and then it kind of, it kind of this proof went away. And I guess my assumption had been that these movements didn't really have an understanding of themselves that was like properly political. So they didn't have an understanding of what they wanted to build. They just were complaining about the system as it is. And because of that, they couldn't really conceptualize themselves after another radical force from the scene. Men's rights activists are particularly kind of in the situation where it's just so obvious that their checks bounce, right?
Yeah,
It's
very,
going to catch men's
very much
rights
so.
checks.
Yeah, you bring up a very interesting thing. I guess we can go into kind of like a manosphere history here, as it were. But just like the dissident right has changed, throughout the years, the manosphere, even though I cringe at the term because it's not exactly a thing, because the term manosphere was coined by Jezebel, I believe it was. It was actually like a smear tactic against like these online like men's circles. So as much as I cringe at the term, I'll just use it for sake of the argument here.
It comes from the same place as man cave, right?
Yeah,
for
exactly.
a lounge, basically.
Yeah, very much so. But yeah, so the sphere has changed. I guess I mean, you could probably really like put a start of it with like the Hugh Hefners of the world in like the 60s and 70s and stuff like that. Because like men have basically been wanting to make money and prosper and screw a lot of chicks basically since the beginning of time. And now just in the age of mass media became more out in the open and stuff like that. So I guess you could say it started there. But
there's Don Giovanni, right, with the famous Mozart opera with the statue and the devil. That's a great one, great example of this, right?
Yeah. And so I guess it really started to get going on the inception of the internet here, and this is when you go back to like the old school pickup artist guys like Mystery, with who.
Wow, yeah,
and he had his books and his blog, and this is back in the day where peacocking was the big thing, where
that's so old. Yeah, exactly. No, it's so old it doesn't even associate it with the other ones.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's definitely where it got its start. And then in the early 2000s, you had forums like the SoSwap forum and stuff. And this is where in like 2002, the term like actual like red pill and blue pill and stuff was coined in those forums. I mean, and of course, arguments go back with people in like Yarvin's sphere of influence that argue who came up with the term first. But that's when like the manosphere people like coined it, and it was starting to get used around like 2002 and stuff like that. And this is where you had people like Royce, Roosh, Rollo Tomasi, and people like that started to come up in the sphere. And then in 2005, you had Neil Strauss, and he came out with his book, The Game. And at that point, that's kind of when things really actually got, quote unquote mainstream, as much as like mainstream can be, because even the biggest, manosphere accounts, it's not even 1 million subscribers on like YouTube and stuff. It's like the nichest of niche markets, so as much mainstream as it can get, I would point it to somebody like Neil Strauss. And then, when you get into like the 2010s, the forums got a lot larger. You started having true YouTube stuff. And this is when you get like more of the men's rights activist kind of guys. And, there's a myriad of reasons why they completely fell apart, and you don't really have to get into them. And now basically, since they've fallen apart, we're kind of getting into different factions of the sphere. There's still MGTOWs, there's still pickup artists, there's still masculinity like influencers. I guess you could kind of have like BAP like in his sphere is like adjacent to that, and then we have
kind of, you can get the same kind of tone, I guess, in some sense.
Yeah, there's definitely some overlap there. And then what has come up in the last like 2 or 3 years is, I guess you could call it a true like faction of strong influencers in the manosphere, centered around people like Rollo Tomasi and what they call Rule Zero, essentially. And basically, they have different guys from all different kind of expertises. They have, some of the guys that are still around from like the Return of Kings days, like Troy Francis for like the old pickup artist stuff is around. You have Ryan Stone, who's a specialty in like a relationship and marriage from the Married Red Pill forum. Rollo Tomasi's kind of more Evo Psych stuff. And then you overlap with people like George Gammon or Aaron Clary or Rich Cooper, who are more on like the finance side of things. So everyone is kind of forming around the core four, which is kind of what I gave my speech at the Shieldings event this year about. And the core four being muscles, money, game, and frame. And essentially that is what the whole sphere, or at least the guys that are worth anything or worth a damn, are centering around at this point, saying, okay, we had issues in the early 90s when people like Roosh and Mystery were just focusing on just picking up chicks and screwing everything, that walked into the bar kind of deal. And they realized that that was, a dead end, so to speak. It didn't give you the full fulfillment of life. So what else do you need? Well, you need money, because, you need to be, man's part of Beta Bucks provisioning is, providing for, a family or yourself or whoever. And obviously we also need to to include fitness in part of this stuff because you need to be fit and all this kind of stuff. Women look for attractive men, and also you just live a more rich and fulfilling life if you're in physical shape. And then, the game was kind of the stuff we already figured out, 30 some odd years ago, even though it is like kind of changing since social media stuff.
I'd say the big thing here is like you're telling this history, but right in the center of it, the process that was continuing on slowly from 1968 had a huge drop down with the introduction of the apps, and in particular Tinder.
Yeah,
and so, like it's amazing because I thought things were pretty bad when I was dating in 2013 or whatever, but I saw just the beginning of this, but apparently they're getting even worse, which is hard to imagine in some sense.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean,
it's essentially feast or famine at this point if you're on the apps, and unfortunately that is where most people are these days, because 75, according to some statistics, 85% of relationships start online at this point, which it definitely doesn't paint a very good picture for us. For sure.
Well, I've met my wife. I mean, I hate to say this, I'm really anti-app, and but I met my wife online on a religious dating site. I always say this, like it's not. I could have met her in real life. I was a fairly social person, and she was in my circles, but it accelerated the process. And like I say, the only successful uses of the apps have been people meeting people they might have met otherwise just sooner. And I don't know.
Yeah, could be. There's definitely like new strategies, I guess, for lack of a better word, that are forming around these apps, and it's even more that they're getting specialized at this point. So there are Christian dating sites, rural dating sites. They don't really have they're not picking up as much steam as some of like the really big accounts like Tinder, Hinge, and Bumble. Those are the big three. But the market is adjusting. So I'm curious to see where this changes over the next 5 to 10 years here. But yeah, it fixes some problems but creates new ones.
I don't know. I think the apps have created a lot more problems than they solved. I think.
Yeah, I tend to agree, but it's. Yeah, I think this is probably going to be the right off the start. This is probably going to be the biggest disagreement we have in the whole thing. I would almost kind of classify it as like relationship Machiavellianism, as it were. It's just, this is the state of the world at play, and these are the best tools that all of our guys from all around the world have figured out is the best way to navigate this marketplace. Because as much as we all hate it, it's not changing anytime soon. The incentives just aren't there for this train to be stopped, unfortunately. So it's just taking a cold, hard reading of the situation and figuring out, okay, how am I going to navigate through this, and what's the best way to do it?
Well, I mean, but you're already kind of implicitly pointing out the next follow-up question, which is, what are you going to do about it? For what end? For just, I mean, are you just like juicing out like dopamine, or are we trying to fix the problem, or are we just trying to create a small little community, or start a family, or get an optimized wife out of the situation? I mean, like the Machiavellian stuff is, insofar as it is simply a description of politics, it's almost the least interesting part about politics. Politics can't be done without a teleology and without an understanding of what is the actual objective.
Well, for your that list of outcomes that you gave me right there, there's resources in the space for all of those, and it just depends on what you want to do as a man in this current hellscape of the modern dating marketplace. What does that look like from your life? Because women are women, no matter what you personally are. If you're a tradcon, if you're a MGTOW, if you're a pickup artist, if you're right wing, if you're left wing, women are the same, and they generally respond to the same kind of cues. So basically,
yeah, there's a lot of similarity. That's our society underappreciates how similar women are, and they underappreciate how divergent men tend to be. There's a big difference in the sigmas between those groups, in my experience, and you can't understand dating without respecting the differences in those sigmas. By the way, sigma for stats brain people is a measure of variance, or sorry, standard deviation. Sigma squared's variance. So men are in terms of quality, quite divergent, whereas women tend to cluster both in behavior and quality as well.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest problems why the men's rights movement just completely failed, because men are not simply collectivist in that way. Like, we're never going to be able to gang up together in one group and just fight for our own individual rights as a collective, in the sense that women will with a movement like feminism, because
Yeah,
we're innately hierarchical. So we're always going to want to one up each other.
it's so obvious. And first of all, like no healthy society will cash checks that men make in the name of collective men's rights. It's almost a ridiculous concept, because by definition you're kind of creating rights for probably really bad actors, and the more likely men will abuse that in ways that women, well, they will abuse it too, but they'll abuse it a lot less flagrantly. And that's why no society is going to just write a check to men's rights generally the way they will women's rights.
Yeah, I think it also just goes to something even deeper than that. Is that just on a biological level, men are simply, they're expendable, and and they always have been and they always will be, and it's just a fact of life. So like, no matter what the progressive ideology tells people about victim ideology and stuff like that, men are simply never going to be viewed as victims to the same way that women will be. Just it's just a simple fact of the matter.
I mean, our society is going to take about at least probably a 10% attrition rate on men not contributing to the next generation. And that's like minimal. There have been times in our species' life where it's been like 80% attrition, which I don't think we're necessarily in one of those circumstances. But, these are realities we probably have to deal with. But on the teleology front, I don't know. The thing is that so much of this, in the way I look at these things, is so much of once you have sort of a teleology hammered out for yourself, a lot of these things are just come down to. I mean, you can take the bad odds, right? But most of it's just health, sociability, and understanding what you're looking for. And a lot of men, they tell themselves they want to have like a trad wife or something like that, but then they don't position themselves in a place to get that, and they're not social enough to get that, and they have financial problems, and they have very pronounced health problems, both psychological and physical, and it just like all of these things. And then they spend a lot of time like reading like these weird tips for people in bars from like the 1990s, and who goes to bars anymore. I guess you're trying to search engine optimize your Tinder profile, or you're trying to nail the first DMs you get from girls on Bumble or whatever. I mean, sure, but that's such a vanishingly small percentage of the what dictates success for men. And furthermore, when you are in some religious communities, I mean, you see some pretty awkward guys score, like, and that score sounds kind of derogatory, but like they marry pretty well because they're positioned well enough and they're targeting the right girl, and they have reasonably good prospects professionally, and they're socially awkward and their game sucks, and but they this strategic positioning kind of got them out of this idea that they had to master some kind of thing like negs or peacocking or whatever,
Well, yeah. I mean, absolutely. There's we went over like how women generally respond to the exact same things, but of course, there's going to be some variance in there, of course. And if you come from like a more religious community and stuff like that, then your game does need to be adjusted for your audience has to be calibrated, as it were. And this is why we have guys in the space. I think back to somebody like Dalrock, who was explicitly a Christian married guy. He was one of the moderators on the Married Red Pill forum that specifically just gave Christian advice for guys. And this is why, basically what we have with the Red Pill and the Manosphere is the largest sociological study in human history, with hundreds of thousands of guys, if not millions at this point, who are all putting in, their own different field reports from all around the world. And we've basically all come to, all paths lead to Rome, essentially, and it's basically you just have to be wise enough to know what you want out of your own life, and then if there are certain tools that you can use in certain situations, like we've got a post for it, like okay, you're a guy who's in a 6-year relationship in the Catholic Church, and your wife is extremely neurotic and is no longer giving you sex. So what do? A divorce is not something on the table. Well, we've got posts for that. Or you want to spin plates, or you just want to get over approach anxiety, or whatever it is, there's something in it for you. And it definitely
Sure.
becomes a problem because obviously outrage sells, of course, so your Andrew Tates of the world are always going to get more clicks than somebody like Dalrock would. It's just the nature of the beast, so
Yeah, I know, but the issue here is the issue here is that individually what you're describing is just sort of a hobbyist community. Hobbyist sounds bad, but a hobbyist community, or a technical community of engineers that are interested in this one system called the female imagination, or the female mating imagination, or whatever. But the thing is that, like, and that's fine, right? Like, you can talk about that in the abstract, but the larger political reality is that, collectively speaking, there has to be an answer to these questions. And until there is, the worldviews are kind of at war with each other.
mm.
I mean, the obviously, it's complete sexual market chaos right now, but spinning plates and doing this, it makes whatever community you're doing it, that it actually makes the problem worse for future generations of men. Because
Well,
if so if you were, obviously no one's in like a small community, but at a collective level, as communities hopefully form up, as we're trying to accomplish, like this becomes sort of a collective problem, right?
Yeah, for sure. I could definitely see that. I think the main response I would have to it would be that, well, first of all, the biggest issue in the society with the sexual marketplace as it is not pickup artists in the manosphere causing the problems. It's a reaction to the problems that were already on the ground, and those problems are largely, number one, the Industrial Revolution, and number two, the birth control pill. And
Yeah.
neither of those two things are going away anytime soon.
No,
Um,
but I would kind of repose this, because yeah, you're right. Like, pickup artists are too small of a community for this to be like one of the major parties who fucked us over relationship wise. But I can repose this in a way that into a group that obviously did. Uh, Boomer men definitely put us in this situation. Boomer men spun plates, and then they thought that the sexual marketplace that allowed them to do this more or less consequence free would survive sexual promiscuity going on for 30 years, and it didn't. Women's behavior eventually reacted to that, and everything's degraded to the point where you can't play the ground. I don't think we are even really conscious of how easy it was to kind of I don't know, I'll use your word, like, spin plates, or just sow wild oats in the 1970s. It was incredibly easy because the reaction to that hadn't happened, and people were still thinking you were playing by 1950s dating rules. And so the thing is that
I would say people are
young
still,
men have a
yeah.
right to be kind of upset at boomer men, because they literally fucked everything over, and now they're not even acknowledging that this problem exists. They're just like, well, you don't get out there enough, right?
Yeah, I'm a little. I could definitely understand the argument of placing blame at the feet of boomer men, but I think the problem is even a deeper root than that. I think that immediately when you had the Industrial Revolution and then the consequence birth control pill afterwards, this was just a naturally going to occur just because of women's mating strategy of hypergamy. And at this point, because of the Industrial Revolution, where women are now entering the workforce and can completely detach themselves from the beta buck side of hypergamy, which was traditionally exclusively provided to them by men. And when they can provide for themselves, they don't need men anymore. They simply want men. And if you want men and you don't need them, the only men you're going to want are the absolute guys at the top of the food chain. So this spinning plates culture, and I guess you could call it like a soft form of like polyamory, basically.
It's polygamy.
It was brought on by women's own choices. It is women's own nature, and which has led us to this point.
So I think this is the disagreement. I fundamentally do not think that it's useful or responsible to describe the macrocosmic problem as originating from women. Maybe the Industrial Revolution, maybe the birth control pill, but our reaction to those events were political decisions, and political decisions largely carried out by men. And I think that whenever you have, I'm going to be misogynistic here, but like whenever you have a political problem and the political problem is being blamed on women, the collective, something like as a historian, something collectively just says this is bullshit.
Well, I wouldn't even say it's like it's not like a blame. Like it's not women's fault to be hypergamous. It's just
or this modern phenomenon happened because something that women have always done for the entirety of their existence. That seems also unusual, right?
I think now, because of the specific circumstances and conditions, like the extreme affluence of Western nations and stuff like this, has resulted in women's already inborn nature now being put into overdrive. And you can actually see this in the same way with men with pornography usage, because the ultimate sexual strategy for men is unlimited access to unlimited sexuality without using your resources. So simply just Genghis Khanning your way across the whole world. That is the ultimate expression of the male sexual strategy,
which you can have simulated for you in pornography.
Correct. And that's why it's so prevalent in our society, because these are innate biological hard drives basically in men and women that have been around for hundreds of thousands of years in us at this point, and we're still struggling with you could say the last 150 years of the Industrial Revolution and the last 60 years of the birth control pill, and we're still struggling to try and figure out how to deal with this. And I don't have the answers on a collective sphere right here, because I don't see those two things going away. I see the only way for us to do this is to go forward and see what we can do. So my goal above all else is to get guys to the point where they can have the skills that they need to have relationships with women, whatever that may be. Preferably would be families and such like that. But I'm also not going to, encourage guys to get into the marriage marketplace currently in the West, when 50% of them end in divorce and 85% of them are initiated by women. And there's no incentive in the West to get married right now.
Okay, but this is I think this is a statistical misunderstanding. That you don't enter into a marriage marketplace, you marry a woman. And so if you make your choices correctly and you pick your communities and you look for the right things, then those numbers are not the same. That's a statistical average over the entirety of our degenerate society.
It's true, but
so this is not like. And furthermore, this is to go back to our original point, and this is what we need to really think about. We could debate over whether historically you could always attributing historical blame is always hard because everything is always multifactorial. But one of the reasons why I always like to think of it in terms of decisions made by men or made by our leaders is because regardless of whether we think that it was men or hypergamy or the birth control pill or the Industrial Revolution that got us into this, the only way we could possibly get out of this is through decisions by men to create some alternative system that does not work by these rules that are rapidly destroying our society. And so even if it is women's fault or something like that, like it doesn't. The only way you get out of it is by actions through the male half of the species.
Yeah, I just object to the frame of saying fault basically, because it simply just is. It is the situation we're in. There might be some decisions made at some point that were evil in nature by certain elites to exacerbate the problems. But again, I just point back to the problems were pretty much already coming once we decided that this is the way we were going to go, the extreme affluence of our situation and stuff like that. And like we were talking about the men's rights groups and everything, I don't see how we're going to get guys together as a collective to solve this problem, because where's the incentive for us to get together to solve this problem as a collective? I think the incentive is to give individual guys the tools that they need to have the relationships that they want, and to just build their best lives out of that. And hopefully those are the best kind of relationships that last through whatever it comes into the future that we want to build. I don't know what that looks like. I don't think anybody knows what that looks like, but
Well,
I don't really,
sure.
I don't see like the time machine as an example for us. I think, unless you
Okay,
want to go
but
back to like Amish communities, but I don't really think that anyone wants to do that.
well, I think some amount of technological limitation will have to be part of the solution at some stage. It's certainly, I mean, like,
I would argue that would come from collapse rather than, an actual choice to be made upon people.
I don't know, limiting things like pornography, like that's a technology. And you limit
Yeah.
things like pornography, and you get good results from that, generally from the societies that do that. And then you can just apply that logic further out to things that we haven't considered limiting yet. And you'll come up with all sorts of answers that, I mean, technology limitation does not mean that you have to go back to windmills. It means that you have to look at technology and ask if it actually benefits your life or if it hurts it. Is this actually a tool or is it a drug? And if it's a drug, then why are you onboarding it into your system when it destroys your biological and sociological and religious function? The thing is that this when we get to the thing, like, we can put some, the whole point of this stream is to kind of talk about this aspect of it. But okay, a solution, like we're moving towards a solution. The thing is that you're not going to be out, like, you're right, that men's rights activists are bonkers. A bunch of single men aren't going to get together and complain their way into getting rights attributed to them by society generally.
Yeah, men take rights with the sword.
Okay, but the alliance you're looking for, if you want a way out of this system, is an alliance of young single men with older married family men. That's the alliance you're looking for. The older family men have the connections, and they don't want to have their children infected by this horrible society. And the younger men have the ambition and the capacity for heroic action. And that's the only combination that's ever gotten out of us, out of situations like this.
I'm curious as to you to flesh this idea out a little bit more here. So what would be I guess what would be like your solution from a situation like that? So we have like I don't know, we could take like an example from like our community just for sake of the argument, like
religious communities was what I was thinking of. But I mean, the problem is our community is, if we're talking about sort of the Sildings thing, it's like this is an intellectual community that's almost entirely men. And there are almost entirely people who are artists and content creators. It's a community of production. It's not a community of reproduction yet. So
well, this is how I mean, like how it's nigh on impossible to get a group of guys together to bring about this situation that you describe, unless we have like huge incentive changes here. And
how happened in the past?
Well, you tell me how it happened in the past. I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to. Like, are you referring to like a Rome?
I'm talking about any circulation of elites, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But then again, like, I'm not entirely convinced that this is a problem of like just because our elites are terrible and degenerate and want to continue to encourage this kind of degenerate behavior. I'm not entirely convinced that would solve all of our problems.
So what would solve our problems? Is the human race dead?
No, it's not necessarily. I don't know what the human race is. I mean, one issue that would solve this problem would be, just the meteor and like a complete reset when women would actually like need men for, protection and provisioning again. That would be one way to do it. Other than that, I'm not entirely sure what it's going to look like. Who knows what the future is going to hold for us in, the 21st century here. I mean, we can only imagine, but I'm not.
We can have walk through the possibility. Like, one thing you mentioned was collapse, right? But collapse, you would want a sort of intergenerational community like the one I mentioned, right? Like if you're going to experience collapse, you would want to be in a community with a bunch of families, with experienced older men, and then younger single men who are really ambitious and have that heroic energy in them. Like that's what you'd want to be. That's the place you'd want to be in a collapse. You wouldn't want to be someone who's just, playing, like optimizing for hedonism, playing the field, like atomized, but
I think
SEO the Tinder app or whatever, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a slight bit of mischaracterization of a lot of where the sphere is now, and a lot of guys that are still in it, and that are actually trying to succeed in giving guys the tools they need. I wouldn't call it so much hedonism. It's just simply acknowledging that the facts on the ground, it's not looking good out there for guys. Basically, no matter who you are, no matter what community you're in, the marriage rates are collapsing all across the West. And even though they are higher in religious communities, it's still not as high as they historically were.
I'm not disagreeing with that, but I'm asking what we should do or what we should work towards.
I'm thinking what I see, a solution that I see, if we would call it a solution, is just to get a bunch of guys, preferably in a community like ours, who are all switched on and red pill aware, whatever you want to call that, so to ensure that they aren't going to be simped, or excuse me, ensure that they don't simp for women, and they can have the kinds of relationships that they want. Because you need to become attractive in order to get a woman to be attracted to you in the first place, particularly in a sphere like ours, where, as
I agree,
it's almost 100% men at this
point. Most of men's, insofar as there are a set number of losers and winners, the way that a man takes himself out of the loser column is mostly working on his own health.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, which is why it's always the first thing we tell anybody in this in the sphere is go to the gym.
I meant them more broadly, like financial health, spiritual health, and physical health.
Yeah, that as well. And again, that's what we're the sphere is all gathering around at this point. You need to be the complete man. Like faking it till you make it, like Mystery did in the bars with the chicks in the 90s, is good for getting your rocks off, but it's not good for having a healthy family, or a long life or a long relationship, or whatever it is that you want to do. I mean, I can understand why some guys just want to completely check out and go MGTOW with this marketplace. I understand it. It's not something I would agree with or something I would encourage, but I understand the thought process.
Yeah. I mean, actually, did I interrupt you? I'm sorry. Were you still going on the solution?
No,
well, I mean, I guess the decision guys have to make is what are they working towards? And I would encourage people to build families if they're not completely dedicated to some other project, like some grand artistic or political project. That's the thing. Like, I think that's the problem, is that men, they're hedonistic and they don't want to work for something outside of themselves. And
I think all people are just naturally, lazy, and I guess like hedonism falls into that a little bit, because laziness is a survival strategy in our species, kind of the same way why eating sugar for the longest time, give us the energy boost. And now it's become to the point where sugar is so easily acceptable. We now have an outbreak of like diabetes and obesity and stuff like this.
Yeah. And I think that, like, it's a very good analogy. I think that people eat too much sugar, and I think that they're losing themselves to indolence in very much the same way. So I think that the only solution is kind of to move into one of those, either dedicate yourself to some greater cause or dedicate yourself to forming a family.
Yeah, you absolutely will not find a meaning and purpose in like the red pill and the manosphere. That's not what we offer, and anyone who says that is what we're offering is selling you something. And there's plenty of guys out there that are trying to do that to grift off of people. You think of like the Jack Murphys of the world and stuff like that. So there's definitely problems with that. But we are the sphere just strictly is what it's always has been, is guys swapping notes and positive male identity. That's all it is. And there's resources for family acquisition, which if you're in this community, this is what you should be striving for and should be building, because that's what, people in our sphere of things want to be doing. But if you're trying to look for, and a 12-step program to, this is how we repeal the 19th, and this is how we, get women to need men again, you're not going to find that in my work or in anybody else's, really. It's just outside our purview. It's not what we offer.
Yeah. Well, I guess I appreciate that this exists as I'll call it a technical community, or it's a community that practices descriptive technical psychology, and that it's completely morally neutral. As somebody who appreciates Machiavelli, I can appreciate communities that exist in moral neutrality, even if they can be used for wrong purposes.
Yeah,
But
you will find dark things like in the sphere. There are like corners
sure.
of there definitely are posts about guys like cheating on their wives and then divorcing their wives and then making them plates again and sleeping with other women. Like there are there are things in there, but the space has to remain amoral and apolitical. Otherwise, we never get down to the actual issues, as it were. And just like I gave the example of how the dissonant right has changed, the sphere itself has also changed. Like we've tested out different mental models. We figured out that some work and some don't work, and the old ones have kind of been cast aside and thrown away, and the ones that have lasted are still around.
But I guess I'm going to refocus us back on my larger question, which is how do we move towards a system that does work? Because that's what concerns me as a political actor. I'm no longer on the dating market, and
Right.
last time I was, it wasn't. Well, who knows how I'd had luck these days because of the latest collapse, I should say. But what concerns me as somebody with sort of one foot in the next generation is creating a system that does work, that's not horrifically worse than the one we have right now. And that this sort of goes to your point, because I think you said the only way out of this is to create a community of men who's going to work cooperatively. And I think, although I don't know if you said this, that this would include families and young men sort of helping each other towards the creation of some system that works better.
Right. So I think I'll also stress this as well. Like me, myself, as being somebody of the political right, definitely wants to encourage people to, form strong families, because that is what forms the backbone of a strong society. And it has formed the backbone of our society for, 1,000+ years at this point. So it is something I would love to see for my own political purposes and everything like that. I just try very, very hard in my content and that I put out to ensure that I don't give descriptions to people. I have guys all the time that reach out to me in my DMs asking for advice and things like this. And the first question I ask anybody who DMs me is, well, what do you want? Because I'm not in the business of,
Fair enough.
I'm not in the business of, telling everyone a step-by-step, life of what I went through to get to the place where I am, where I'm good with chicks. Like, because my step process isn't necessarily going to work for you, because you might be in a different place, or you might have different personality or something like that. So the idea is to get you thinking about yourself, thinking about what you want, and thinking about what tools you can use to, form whatever goals that it may be. Now, for most people in our groups, it is going to be starting a family. So the best place for you to start is to, get your own physical fitness in order, get your finances in order, get your mental health in order, and then, become charismatic. And the same tools that are used for pickup artistry are also just used for being charming and charismatic to, any woman or any person that you meet on the street. So there definitely is an overlap there. And that's, kind of what I'm looking for here for my own political purposes, is guys who are switched on, who are red pill aware, and by being red pill aware, they're not going to be subverted by women who eventually will come into our space. And this is exactly what happened with the men's rights community. Is the second you got people like what was their name, Cassie J and Christina Hoff Summers and stuff like that, the second the women get into the space, the guys just immediately start turning on each other and trying to one up each other in order to get into the good graces of the woman in hopes of easy access to sex.
So I don't know. Easy access to sex with Christina Hoff Summers.
Well, yeah.
That would be a rare individual who is in that position. But,
right. But I just use that as an example.
Yeah, no, I understand. I do understand people's problems with the role that a lot of bad actors have played in the right wing. That's been sort of undeniable, and it's undeniable the effect that has on men to sort of defocus them. I guess first of all, it seems that so much of this advice, the best advice is always stuff that would just been taught to men as just manliness in a different generation.
Yeah, well,
and the stuff that's like,
the problem.
the stuff that's seedier, it doesn't really last very long. If you know, do you remember that? Do you remember when like the neg was the thing? Like like everyone was talking about negs all the time. It's like this. Does that really works? I mean, I bet that worked great in 2005 or something like that. But it's just like these little like seedier tactics that their lifespan's really limited.
So like, I guess I could just like, use neg as an example kind of deal. I think there's a stark difference between, going on the Red Pill subreddit before it got quarantined, it got nuked, and just taking, lines that some guy used in a field report and then just completely, using that yourself. There's a difference between faking it and then actually being it. Like if you are the game, then yeah, negging is absolutely a good tactic that you can use in certain situations, but it has to be, calibrated. You have to know like what you are. Like, that old saying, like, don't let your mouth, something about the whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? The your ass can't cash. Don't
your mouth right checks your ass can't cash.
Yeah, exactly. Forgot about that for some reason, but yeah. So I don't really see it as being so much of a problem as guys just like seeing the material and then going out in the world and just acting on it, because women are pretty switched on to this kind of stuff. They've been
they are.
Yeah, they've been hit on by guys since the second they turn like 15 or 16. They have 10 years plus experience in the dating marketplace than most men do. So they're pretty switched on to this kind of stuff. If you're not like the calibrated guy and actually know what you're doing, I mean, there definitely is like a part of faking it till you make it, but you just got to make sure that you actually make it. So this is kind of why I take a little bit of issue with everyone saying, oh, it's just like a snake charmer stuff. Well, it actually is like speaking into what you were saying before. You would have just been taught this kind of stuff from another male authority in your life, or go to the third world and speak to it. Go to the third world and speak to a taxi driver and he'll tell you the same thing too. But you're just speaking at the core of the problem here in the West, is that guys simply just do not have male authority figures. They're being raised as defective women. They have no male authority in their homes. Single motherhood rate is zooming through the roof. And even, many cases, I mean, I could say this in my own family as well. It's like the dad is there, but he's just emasculated and henpecked, which is arguably even worse. And then you have, no male authority in your schools, because men have been forced out of those either due to, low paying jobs. So, you can't raise a family by being a teacher, or, sexual harassment, nonsense and everything that's thrown at guys all the time for that and stuff like that. So essentially what you're having is the mental model of guys being raised as defective women. And this is why the sphere and the space is exploding right now, and it's going so mainstream at an astronomical rate compared to in the past, is because we have so many guys, a new generation, the Zoomers, who are coming up right now, getting into their college ages right now, and are realizing that all the stuff, the mental models that they were given since they were kids, is completely wrong. And it's not working for them, and they're searching for answers. And that's why, people like in my space are just exploding right now, because we are offering, why, these systems, like being the nice guy and stuff like that, just don't work.
Yeah, I mean, so much of this is just feminist lies for the last 60 years, or progressive lies, being more accurate. And some they probably look, this is the thing, but because they weren't a Christian society previously, I'm sure this worked a little bit better. Because if you're in the 50s, like, women would actually be looking for more of a nice guy because of the marriage assumption, the sort of search for the top 10% of the dating market, and it was just not really an option, and they were genuinely looking for sort of a mid-range nice guy in the 19th. It's hard to imagine now, but that actually is what people were looking for. So these sort of
this is also why I don't
vapors
really
from
this is also why I really don't like putting the blame so much at the boomer guys, because to be honest, they tried their best. Like they did not know, the landscape was changing, as it were, and that the old models of being the guy that just went to the factory and worked a 9-to-5 job, and that was enough back in the day. And today, it just simply isn't. It's not. The sexual marketplace is global. Women have delusional expectations at this point, due to the delusion of choice from things like online dating and social media and things like this. So like, they tried their best, they just didn't know that the ground was shifting underneath their feet, beneath them. And now that what women's proclivities and their nature has been throughout all of history can now be completely unfeathered because of modern technology and modern convenience.
Yeah, I mean, that's just delusional on their part, though. It's like the manosphere used to make fun of the woman in her 20s who went to a bar and got attention from 35-year-olds. Then when she's 35, she's amazed that 35-year-olds men are paying attention to the 20-year-old girl, but she wasn't when she was that 20-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. But it's literally the same thing for these boomer guys. I mean, what did they think was going to happen? They thought that this was going to be the new pattern. You spun plates throughout your 20s, and then you got to 35 and married a woman who was, who had very limited sexual experience, who was 10 years younger. That's totally unsustainable on a larger level. There's no way that could sustain. I think it's just mathematically impossible.
No, I agree. I think more so their issue simply was they were like, women are the selectors in our species, and men just simply have to deal with that. So I kind of point it more to like the free love movement in the 50s and the 60s, was just started as a reaction to like the birth control pill, and now women can just have casual free sex. And it was an idea at the time, the new liberal like paradise, like everyone's gonna be able to have sex all the time, and we're one step closer to equality. And then this was tried out, and as we've all seen, it's been an abysmal failure.
Oh. I mean, cooler heads needed to prevail to intercept this, and I think they could have. Maybe they didn't see what we saw, so
yeah,
obviously we can.
Potentially, I think another issue that
it's, in my opinion, it's men's role to intercept these, or I should say, elite men's role to intercept these things for society, and there is an elite failure.
Here comes the next part, and I'm glad you brought this up because this is going to be my next point. So I think another issue that you had in the 50s and 60s and whatever led up to this, you basically had, for the first time in human history, you had mass slaughter of alpha males on a scale that was at that point not even seen before in history between the two world wars. And basically the 1950s, where everyone was working a 9-to-5 job, and more men in all of history had a chance to breed in the 1950s than had ever done previously, because traditionally it was 1 out of 17, one man for every 17 women had a chance to breed.
Well, no, that wouldn't have been the pattern in like the 19th century, though.
No, that's all I'm saying.
That's because of specific bottlenecks that happen for very particular times in history.
No, I'm saying this now. I'm getting to the next point. So you had in the 1950s, because there were far fewer men around, because 100 million of them had been wiped out in 2 world wars. You now had more men to go around for beta buckside, I guess you could say, provisioning, when traditionally women would be looking for more alpha people, but all the alpha guys got killed. So the 1950s, basically was a very short period in time when all the other industrialized nations were completely destroyed, and you had a large swath of alpha guys who also got killed. So essentially, this time of the nice guy going to the 9-to-5 job was a very unique historical time period that I don't think you can replicate with that traditional 1950s monogamy in the modern day, unless you bring out those conditions again.
Yeah, I would locate the nice guy phenomenon not to. I mean, I think that nice guy in the context of just open dating might be an exclusively 1950s thing, but the priority of nice men over flashy men is something that you can see through most of later European Christian history up until, obviously the sexual revolution. So, I don't think it's just like this flash in the pan. I think that if you had a high trust society with regulations that really force people to get married, then that quality becomes more demanded, because it's something that's more of a utility in marriage and less of a utility just in exchanges of casual sex for women.
Yeah. So, for the record as well, I want to also stress something. I'm seeing guys bring this up in the chat as well, is that alpha and beta does not simply mean like good and bad. You need both of these qualities in you to have a healthy long-term relationship. We've used these terms alpha and beta as abstractions to describe certain traits and behaviors to get certain responses from women. So your alpha traits are what attract women to you, and the beta traits is what keeps women around. And you need both of them. So in you would point to somebody like a Mystery, again, I'll use it as an example, would just over-index in the alpha traits. He could get girls, but he couldn't keep them around. And that's where you had a lot of issues with people like Roosh V. And this is why he, largely had his prodigal son moment, because, he couldn't keep girls around because he hadn't developed those other traits in his system. But, Roosh is kind of a bad example because, he had his sister die and then ended a 5-year relationship all at one period of time. And so he's kind of a unique example. I'm not really in the camp of saying that his conversion is very genuine, but I know he's much beloved by people.
Well, hold on though. On the Bruce question, I think that I was kind of vaguely aware of him, and someone forwarded me a clip where he was answering a question. I could kind of see the prefiguration of his conversion. And that was when a father asked him how he should raise his daughter so that he didn't get taken advantage of by someone like Roosh. And I could see in that moment, like, that's a genuine question that the new Roosh can answer, and the old one really didn't have a very good answer for. Like, teach her to do these things, and then we're gonna teach our guys to detect that and subvert it. That's not a very satisfying answer.
True, and my response is that the seduction game, as it were, is a dance between men and women. Guys have their own tricks, they have their own skills, their own tactics, and women have their own skills and their own tricks and their tactics. And the skills and stuff for women are largely just completely non-existent. And anyone who's currently in the dating marketplace today, especially with the younger girls, girl game is just complete garbage.
Yeah, no, they don't know how to flirt anymore. They don't know how to flirt anymore. It's actually amazing. Like, they don't flirt. It's, you notice this. You just, like, they're just zombies.
Yes, very much so. It's almost like pulling teeth to get something out of a conversation.
But hold on, Redhawk, though. I mean, like, to quote the Big Lebowski, I mean, sure, it's a dance, but this is a nom. There are rules here, and previously, this dance occurred with certain boundaries to it, such that you just didn't have an anarchic bellum omnis contra omnis, the sexual version. And this is the thing with Rouge too. It's just, we talk about, well, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We can't go back to the old world. But like, you just start by listing rules that you would need to have in place to be fair both to young men and to fathers who are trying to protect their daughters. And just by asking those questions, you will rebuild the old rules of the sexual marketplace. Because I'm firm. Maybe you have an alternative. I'd love to hear it, right? But anyone who describes a stable, non-degenerative sexual marketplace inevitably either ends up describing the old Christian norms or some version of, like, the old Islamic norms. It's one version of that, because anything else just degenerates into this thing where the marriage market never clears and no one has any children.
So I would say that the same issues that we're having now, even though they are on a far grander scale in modernity, were still there in the past. You still had divorces and cheating wives and cheating husbands.
Yeah, but this is what the progressives say. I don't know. Like, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but, like, progressives do this bullshit all the time. Yeah, I know there were affairs. I know there were divorces. I know that, like, women cheated. This was fractionally, like, this was minuscule compared to where it is now. And, like, I'm not like a brain dead progressive who doesn't understand the difference between having an illegitimacy rate that's like 5%, as it was with the African, or maybe a 10%, as it was in the early 20th century with African Americans, and having an illegitimacy rate that's 72%, like it is now with the African American community. Those two things aren't the same thing at all.
Right. No, I agree. And the reason why that situation is as bad as it is because the incentive structure isn't there for men to take up the fatherhood role or the husband role, because the incentives of the state just simply aren't there. You need to give men the incentive, and this is one of the things I agree with BAP the most on, is that the issue isn't like, oh, we need to give more child tax credits and stuff to encourage the birth rate to increase or something like that. People are having less sex than ever now. There's something else going on here. There's something else at play here, and basically it's just that men simply don't know how to be men anymore, and women also simply don't know how to be women anymore. So you have two completely broken down sides of this equation here, and basically everyone is just going back to their animal instincts, I guess, for lack of a better word. Like hypergamy is on full display at this point, and women are willingly choosing to basically be this is an old Royce quote. He said that a woman would rather share an alpha than be saddled with a faithful beta. And this is absolutely on full display at this point when you look around all parts of our society. The top guys are spinning plates left and right. The Leonardo DiCaprios of the world. The second a chick turns 25, she gets kicked to the curb, and you pick up the next one. So I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. This is a bad. We're in a bad state of affairs for our society and everything like this. But I don't know. I'm not.
We keep on getting back to the bad current situation, and that's sort of the opposite direction I'm pointing. I agree that women are being incentivized to have this behavior. What I'm saying though is that any healthy behavior sort of inevitably looks a lot like the old system, if not identical to the old system.
Yeah. I mean, could be to an extent. I kind of take issue and argue with if this
Mm-hmm.
old system is really actually what it was kind of deal. And what I mean by that is I think largely what the tradcon fantasy of the 1950s and 60s is largely just based off of movies and cigarette ads of the time. If you look back and look at the data, like I mentioned before, you still had affairs, you still had people sleeping around, you still had guys.
Okay, I'm not going to recite the reality of statistics again. Okay,
yeah.
Like this is not. You have to acknowledge that. I don't know how to put this. This is such a statistic. We can see this in the numbers so clearly. Sure, there were affairs, but that doesn't demonstrate the idea that most people got married and most children were the product of the legitimately married people. You can do genetic studies, and the sort of out of what the sort of cuckolding thing is pretty small, actually, genetically speaking, for the last 1,000 years of Christian history.
So what I'm getting at here, and why I keep pointing back to the things of the past, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I'm saying that this is a intrinsic part of the human sexuality on both sides, and the monogamy is attempts to kind of cope and reel in the natural human nature as we see fit. And the reason why our society is so off the rails with this kind of stuff is because we now live in the affluence to basically have our natural proclivities just be taken advantage of at a whim because we're so affluent. So my point being is that these systems were always there, but they were put in check because we didn't have the affluence and we didn't have, the technology and whatever it was at the time to fully indulge in these things. So I think if you're going to have a solution, you have to limit those things in a way. It's kind of like the old joke that feminism doesn't exist in the third world, and there's a reason for that.
Fair enough. I'm very sympathetic. First of all, I apologize. He has called me out for cutting you off 2 times, but you happen to. This is it's a pet. Unfortunately, there's just certain talking points that progressives make that just arch my back, and the intersection of sexual revolution with statistical problems is distributed crack for pet peeves. So unfortunately, you caught me on one of those things. But no, I get you. You're saying that affluence has to be confronted, that this is the resource glut has to be taken on in some real way.
Yeah,
and
I think that's the only true way to, solve these problems in the sense of, they were quote unquote solved in the past. And I'm not entirely convinced that that is going to be a solution for us, particularly a group of us who are, how many dissidents are there in the West? Not even 100,000. Are we really in a position to, even in any of our lifetimes, to bring about that solution in that situation where we no longer have that kind of affluence? We can get back to, the state at which you describe. I'm not. This is what I mean. I agree with the end state goal. I think we share that. I think the issue is how does that help, the 16-year-old guy who's now just coming up in the game right now, who, has been fed the nice guy, mental framework, and is just completely failing for him. So how does that guy, go and find a family? How does he attract a girl in the first place? Because in order to get married and not have the marriage fall apart, when the chick is just settling for you, how does he attract the girl to him in the first place so he can have the best life to have a family in the first place, and then hopefully, raise children into the next generation, at which point, maybe things have changed. Maybe, we've regressed a little bit as terms of technology, and we're in a better situation than we are now. I think I agree with you in the end state. I just don't see that end state as being remotely feasible for anybody listening to this stream.
Well, okay. I mean, there's two really interesting questions there. The first one is, to what degree can you live in the old system in microcosm? And then the first question was, what do you tell young men who are 17 and just suspecting that the stuff that's coming out of the media and their educators is total bunk? And I mean, I think those are two parts. I mean, I think that what I would tell a 16-year-old was, you've been lied to. This is total bunk. And your probability, if you play this game, your probability of ending up with a family is really low. So,
I do actually disagree with this, for the simple reason that most of the top dog guys in the manosphere have used this information and have long-term wives.
No, I mean progressivism, not.
Oh, right. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My apologies.
Yeah, well, I'm saying, like, if you go and if you tried, like, a lot of young guys, I did this in the 2000s, and I'm sure people in the Bosch community or like BreadTube try to do this, where you get this idea that if you have the right political opinions and you strike the right poses and you simp in the right way, like, you want to be supplicating enough without seeming pathetic, that there's like a place for you in the progressive coalition, and you can kind of game the system. Young men have to be disabused of this. If you play the progressive game, you're lining yourself up with, for in the main, I would say, a life of pornographies and fleeting casual sex, and you have to change what you're going for if you want to have a chance of something different. And that has to be the starting point. And I'd
agree with that.
The two objectives are work so that you can get a family to sacrifice for, or work for a political or artistic or religious project that you feel you can dedicate yourself towards. I'm Catholic, so the idea that you might actually want to become a literal monk is, to me, not an unworthy objective in your life. But
I think it's a path for very small amount of men, however noble it may be. I think I mean, we're tackling with the biggest questions of our age here, basically. Really, everyone in our community is trying to solve these issues in the sense of the progressive stack and everything. And where's the hope for a 16-year-old young guy who's coming up, sees that everything he's been taught to him is basically a lie. He sees that a lot of the older guys are poaching the women off of him. They're in his age group and things like this. So it certainly paints a bleak future for these guys. And my hope is just that, to basically just tell them and the straight facts of how it is, and give them the tools to, build the best life that they can. And that is with muscles, money, game, and frame. All four of those things.
Well, yeah. I mean, I want people to build the best life for themselves, for sure.
Yeah.
That this is. I mean, don't you think, though, one of the things that have really helped me is that I had more success with women when I told myself, if I kind of got to a point where I was like, I'm satisfied with my life. I don't care if I never get married. Maybe I'll become. I was like, maybe I'll literally become a priest or whatever. As I was just converting to Catholicism, and when I developed that attitude, everything became a lot easier.
Yeah, very much so. You basically just described like aloofness right there, and yeah, it's definitely very powerful for you to use. This is one of the biggest things we say in the community is like, sex is important until you're having it. Basically, it's like the first notch is like the really big one, and then once that you get it over with, you're kind of like, oh, I mean, yeah, this is pretty awesome. I still want to have it, but it's not like this, amazing, like enlightening thing, and like all the stars align, and now I know exactly what I want to do in life. It's not like a nirvana moment or a religious experience or something to give you some kind of pathway. I mean, it is an essential part of any man's life, but it's something you got to deal with. But once you get it over with, you can kind of devote yourself to other things, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is the thing. I think that our society is just sex obsessed, and that's one of the reasons that's actually robbing men's masculinity from them, because it's forcing them to define their masculinity in terms of like whether you slept with a woman or not. And one of the things that led to my transformation to this just not caring about relationships at all, that ironically let me be better at relationships, was encountering a few really heroic priests that were just like really masculine and really knew their stuff and were these utter heroes to their communities, and they were virgins, right?
Mm.
And it's like you take a step back and we're like, whoa, what? Like, I was like, compute. I was already Catholic then, right? But this is
there's many ways the game
that clangs on your perspective. Like, there were a huge number of people who never had sex that I mean, including the Messiah himself, that were just way more heroic than so many men who are knocking down all of these women, or what you said, poaching the younger women at bars. That once you put that in the context where there are these men who are doing heroic actions, and then there are men acting like heroes because they slept with 20 women who were like these 90 IQ ditzes who don't even know how to flirt, like, the whole thing seems ridiculous in context.
Well, there's different paths to manhood. I mean, I know Evola speaks about this and stuff like this as well. There's many ways to skin a cat. I mean, definitely part of masculinity and stuff like that definitely is being successful with women. It's definitely been a staple with elites throughout all of society. There's a reason why kings take mistresses and concubines and stuff like that. So I mean, there's definitely a part of that, but that's not to say that the priest or the monk is less of a man because he hasn't slept with like 100 chicks. Like, there's not one defined pathway, 12 rules for life. This is how to be an alpha male or something like that. That's ridiculous. And I do object to guys who say that the 30-year-old like a virgin Christian guy is and not a man because like he hasn't slept with some chick. It's like, no, it does take conviction, to basically go your entire adult life without doing something. I mean, there's something admirable about that. I think I definitely have an objection with a freshly converted like 17-year-old Zoomer who now proudly declares that, making your celibacy somehow a virtue. It's like, no.
No. That's always a problem, is that what makes priests and monks admirable is not it is the celibacy to a certain extent, but it's the vow that makes it admirable, and it's the dedication to the higher purpose, and the celibacy is merely the exterior form of that, and only one part of the exterior form of that. And this is but at the same time, I mean, this is the problem seems to be more foundationally spiritual. The 17-year-old Zoomer is looking for something to dedicate himself to, and there's no way he can really demonstrate that. And I think a lot of misguided young Christian guys, they start advertising the celibacy thing, and it's really misguided. And I'm sure it's embarrassed a lot of them when it's not,
Well, you think of the Nick Fuentes crowd of people who shame guys for going around to just talking to a chick and doing an approach or something like that. There definitely is a faction of online goofballs, that buy into this kind of stuff.
Something way weirder is going on there. I'm actually thinking of something much more innocent, a guy that kind of has a religious conversion early in life and then kind of expects his non-participation in degeneracy to hold more water than it does socially, if that makes sense. But yeah, the Nick Fuentes thing is also kind of cringe.
Right. Yeah. Traditionally, what described an alpha male, like the people who would, be at the top of hierarchies would be, land, power, and women, essentially is what it was. And, to proudly proclaim at a very young age, when you have none of the three, that you're somehow, higher up on the male hierarchy, so to speak, because you're devoting yourself to this cause. I do generally tend to have an issue with that. I think men should be striving to be building something, particularly when you're young, and particularly if you get switched on. I mean, already if you're in like this community at age like 16 or 17, you're already like light years ahead of people in your age cohort, so that's at least that's a start.
Yeah, men have to be working towards something they can dedicate themselves towards, which usually involves building.
Yeah, that's where men get their agency from, is like actually doing something.
Exactly. And when you have these guys who do this pose, a lot of young men, they pose, and it's transparently false because they're trying to wield the form without the essence.
It's almost like they're being raised like women, as defective women.
I was just going to say, it reminds me of the whole late onset transgender people who are, they kind of want to argue you into perceiving them as women. And it's just if it wasn't kind of demonic, it would be really cringe. I'm not going to argue. You can argue me all day long. I'm not going to perceive you in that way. And so this is, I don't know. I mean, maybe this is a life. There's also like stages of life as well. It's that the stage of life I'm at, I'm just constantly concerned about what is it going to be like for a guy who's, in his 20s in 20 years. No bonus points for guessing why I'm thinking that way.
Well,
but that forces me to think of this problem more collectively. And maybe we hear this alluded to all the time. Maybe the only way out is through some kind of collapse. But I like to think that there's collective action that can be taken that is pre-collapsitarian, and because of that reason, that's always the direction I'm going towards. And
right. I think I would generally agree with you. I think my caveat that I would put on top of that, I think we're kind of putting the cart before the horse in that sense. I think my goal is just at the start, just to get guys in a community like ours who are in the service of a higher purpose, whatever that is. Like if you're, a Catholic integralist, you devote yourself to, the church, or, you're just devoting yourself to, saving the West, or you want to take up arms against the anti-whites, or whatever it is. I think it's absolutely essential for you to be red pill aware in addition to that. And that absolutely does not mean by any means that you have to go out and spin plates or anything like that. It's just a set of tools that you should know how to use properly and could absolutely be useful to you in your life. And not just for you to use the tools, but to ensure that you aren't swindled by other people who use the tools against you. This is like, the big point in Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power is a lot of these tools, are immoral, but you should still know them to ensure that you aren't taken advantage of by them. And a big part of a lot of what the red pill teaches guys is to ensure that they aren't getting swindled by women, because there absolutely are predatory women out there. They're increasing in number in these days on the marketplace. And, that's another point that I think is important for guys in our circles who want to start small communities, who want to start political organizations. It's important for them to understand, not to get subverted or not to start simping for, the first chick that pops up into our community. And I'm talking to you guys at the Shieldings event who went and talked to the one chick that was at the event and swarmed around her. All 25 of you guys, I saw ya. I knew what you were doing. So,
of course, you're referring to Mrs. Radlib, who was the star den mother of the entire event, who stole my completely platonic. Obviously, as a married man myself, but of course, you're talking about that. I jest. But sorry, there was one female speaker was our good friend Radlib's wife, who's a wife and a mother, and who gave a rousing speech of encouragement that really, I think, I felt quite touching. Indeed. I always like that. I just female leadership is actually a thing, but it comes in forms that are supremely not masculine, and that hit the perfect note where it was feminine and leadership and spiritual, and those three threads did not conflict in the ways they so often do in modernity. But anyway, I'm digressing. I guess for young men, I always say always be building. but whatever happened to things like sports? I mean, so much. I played on a sports team for 1 year in high school, and like, to be honest, that really influenced me. That did make me more masculine than a lot of my other more nerdy friends, and that's not something to scoff at. I wonder. It
No,
seems
very
like men
much so. Yeah.
play
Not
fewer
only
sports, right?
Yeah, not only are men raised as defective women and have no male authorities, pretty much all the male spaces are entirely gone at this point. I mean, you can look at whether it's sports where basically a lot of the physical contact has been taken out of them because they have to make it more safe for people. And, generally that's how, men test each other with actions. This is why when you get in a group of guys, they're always giving each other shit. They're always making fun of each other. It's kind of like
Yeah.
it's a passive shit test to know, like, oh, okay, like, are you one of us? Like, are you one of our guys? Like, but if you're outside the tribe and, like, I go up to my guy and say, what's up, asshole? But if another random guy on the street says, calls my buddy an asshole, we're pulling out fists, so it's like, do I know that you have my back kind of deal? So yeah, that's gone with like sports, and then male only spaces are largely eliminated. I mean, we saw this with things like Gamergate and things like this. So, another reason why people are flocking to the red pill, because it's one of the few male only spaces that we have left.
I'm so glad you mentioned that insult thing, because as somebody who is kind of a nerd in high school, but also had a foot in the whole sports thing, that was the first thing I realized, that my nerdy friends didn't insult each other, or very much, and all of my jock friends did. It was amazing, and I didn't realize it, but that's actually a huge thing for guys, because it really, the shit tests that women give you are just kind of echoes of the ones that your guy friend should already be giving you.
Yep, very much so.
And so this is yeah, I mean, in my mind, we really have a collapse of male communities. That's one of the big problems. And I think maybe we have got to find some way of reestablishing that. And
yeah, it's definitely something I'm trying to work on. I mean, you've been in a couple Telegram chats with me, and I've mentioned this a couple times before in there, that I'm trying to organize, based hunting trips, like for dissident right people. So that's something I'm going to try and work on in the next like a couple of years here. So I'm gonna work on that a little bit and try and do my part on that front. And that's also kind of something I want to do with my my main podcast, Man's Hour, is when we get more established panels and people coming on there, and we can definitely have more of a masculine space where guys are making fun of each other and stuff like that, and having more camaraderie, as long as the Susan doesn't get a hold of us in the chat. But we'll see how that goes.
How did I not know about your channel? If I've watched your Man's Hour thing, I thought, for some reason, I thought that was an academic agent's channel.
The first episode was, AA gave me a bit of a boost on that one, but they have since moved to my channel.
Okay. Oh, well, they'll have to subscribe to your channel then. But anyway, yeah, that's excellent. Do you have anything else you want to talk to before we get to super chats?
I don't really think so. I think I had a lot of fun with this conversation, and I know we've been, I know we've been wanting to do this for some time. And I messaged you on Twitter when we were at the Gettysburg event, and I didn't really have much chance to talk to you because I was talking to other guys and stuff like that. But
when we were at the Gettysburg event, I was going like 10 times slower than you, because I had family in tow, so we were moving very slowly. But anyway, it looked like a great event, and I heard a few of the speeches, so it looked like fun from my lagging vantage point. But I think what we really have is a difference in emphasis, rather than some kind of very firm intellectual disagreement. I think that, I don't know if there's really a disagreement. I'm just taking things on more from a collective point of view. And I think you're more interested in the techniques that young men need to apply to their own lives for self-improvement. Yeah, and I think that might be the difference.
Yeah, and I think it goes much to the core of what you said as well. I mean, you're going to have a different perspective on this just simply because you're a father, and that's going to be radically different from mine. And the audience of guys that I'm speaking to and the guys that I help and stuff like that. And
Mm.
maybe my opinion would change. Ideally, an end state goal for me is, marriage and kids and stuff like that. It definitely is something that I would like and want out of my life. But much like you were describing earlier, I'm at that aloof point where it's like, well, if it doesn't come, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah,
I want it, but it's largely, out of my control given the crop of women we have in the West. But, that's a whole nother story.
in addition to sports, maybe young men just need to go spend like 3 months at a monastery and just, for a summer.
Yeah, could be. I know.
That would be huge, right? I mean, that would be amazing. I don't
Yeah,
know. I've always
yeah.
thought that might work, right?
Yeah, I thought Lambda was doing something like that in the UK. I haven't checked up on him on that, but I thought he was doing something like that. But
Well, I love Lambda's content. To be honest, I'm
he's a great guy.
Yeah, and he embodies the kind of aloof masculinity that I wish a lot more young Christian men could copy. A lot of young Christian, I mean, I'm one to talk because I kind of had a little bit of insecurity in myself when I was in my 20s that I haven't even fully shed where I am right now. But Lambda has really, he's controlled that in a way, and also his focus and his ability to kind of parse out subtle details inside complex texts. It's not loud. It's not ideally situated for YouTube. It's certainly not search engine optimized, but damn, I've learned a lot from him. So
yeah, he should be reading audiobooks. He has a very good voice for it.
Oh yeah, he did do some audiobooks for Carlisle Day, if I'm not mistaken. But maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. I don't know. But these days I get all my audiobooks from Skeptical Ways. So
yeah.
Anyway, I'll go into the super chats here. Unfortunately, guys, we don't have highlighting, so you're just going to have to let me read them because I'm not doing OBS. So here is the first one from Ben White for $3 USA. Hello, Dave and Redhawk. I've watched my good share of Manosphere content. While not perfect, it's given me new perspectives. For example, it's made me realize how much my mom henpecks my dad. That's true.
Yeah,
that's a stage on the boomer journey, right? Being a henpecked husband.
Yep.
Although, I mean, I can't really speak to it because I, as a point, don't talk about my own parents or on the stream. But it's a dynamic that it plays out in men who are of an advanced age, even if they were completely in control of the relationship when they were younger, if that makes sense. Especially if you marry really young women, like that happens, right? Because the woman's entering, like, she's in her mental prime when you're on the decline. So, this happens, right?
Yeah, it definitely can. There's we'll have to see how things move into the future, because there's a whole generation of guys coming up right now who saw a lot of the mistakes that their parents made, and it'll be very interesting to see if they repeat them, if they learn from them, if they develop new mental models and stuff like that. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, the information out there is available. If anyone wants a place that you could start, if you're in issues in a relationship or a marriage stuff, I recommend my buddy Ryan Stone. He's been married for over 13 years at this point, and he's pretty much like the Manosphere go-to expert guy on relationship and marriage red pill stuff. So definitely.
Well, I mean, not to be fatalistic and thoroughly unmodern, but some of this is just going to happen, right?
I know. You can't save everyone. Yeah.
No, I mean, you can't save anybody.
Yeah.
You're going to have a mental decline, and people are going to take care of you, and those people are going to be probably women, and so you will be in that situation most likely, and that's just a tragedy of life, right? And I think you can still have a lot of dignity, but it's just something that there's you can push back against it, but there are some tragedies in life. Right. And
right.
No matter how you play the game. Ben White again. I can't help but feel like the churches didn't prepare men for dealing with modern women. We can't pretend they're all virtuous maidens. Red pill content gave me a much more balanced view, especially in stuff like hypergamy, money, and divorce courts. Well, what do you think about that? I would definitely say that a lot of religious leaders just buy into the boomer truth regime 110%.
Yeah, I think
And it's kind of depressing, but
yeah,
it's the reality we have to deal with.
yeah, so I have a kind of an interesting response to this. So I'm in a unique position. I was baptized in both the Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church. So
Oh,
I was,
wow.
yeah, so I was raised in both growing up, and in both circumstances. However, I will say the Orthodox Church was better in this regard. Both cases, any church leaders or anything like that, when tackling the women question, always focus on the beta buck side of hypergamy and stuff like that. So you're provisioning and providing and things like this. And you, as I mentioned before, you do need to have an alpha side of your relationship, the boundary setting to keep your woman in line, cockiness, aloofness, funny, things like this to, uh, to be a leader in your relationship. Your woman just isn't going to fall in line because you work, 45 hours a week and put a roof over her head. It's just simply not how it works.
Okay, but I've given this advice to other men, and this is sort of the standard go-to relationship advice I always give. Just win the respect of other men. That's the best training you can do for women. If you win the respect of other men, you're going to have that sort of swagger that you're referencing right now.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and
Yeah,
men are more forgiving too, right? Like if you fuck up and you have a bad night doing like soccer or whatever, or anything, and you'll just come back and have a better night the next week, and you'll learn from the experience.
Yeah, very much so. And also, like, if you have like a lot of relationship equity, I'd like to call it, like being built up. If I was to have one critique of the current state of the manosphere and stuff, and this comes from a lot of the bigger accounts, like my mind goes to people like Fresh and Fit or something like that. They tend to think that hypergamy is a 100% straight jacket, in the sense of the second that a better opportunity comes along, the woman is just going to upend and leave you immediately and stuff like that. And they just treat women like they're just these complete automatons, that just run on instinct all the time. And it's just not the case. Like, if you are like on the top of your game and you're giving her things that nobody else is giving her, then she absolutely is going to stick around, and she is going to stay, and she's not going to fawn over some, random guy on a yacht on Instagram or something, so it's there's definitely a faction of manosphere content creators that make the dating market seem more black pill than it actually is, even though it's certainly bad. Like it's, my mind goes to like MGTOW people who just think like the juice isn't worth the squeeze, because like women
Yeah.
are, I mean, at the end of the day, women are like the greatest thing on planet Earth. They really are, so it's like at the end of the day, it beats, sitting in your room jerking off in your hand, so no one said it was going to be easy.
I think I said this to Thinking Ape. I don't think if you're just optimizing for hedonism and orgasm, then the juice probably isn't worth the squeeze. And as virtuality gets better, it probably won't be.
Yeah, that's
so if you're trying to
a,
squeeze cummies out of your life, I don't know if I really have a message for you.
Yeah, there definitely is a growing faction of guys like this. My mind goes to like not just Thinking Ape, but another guy, a turd flinging monkey, who's a huge advocate of sex bots and things like that. I mean, again, I understand where you're coming from that one, but it's not something I would ever encourage people to do, because at the end of the day, even though women, they are crazy, they are a handful and all the wonderful things, but at the end of the day, they are also a complete enrichment to your life if you get a good one and you know how to handle her properly. And it absolutely is a wonderful thing that I wish more guys would have the opportunity to, have, because I think it definitely is an enriching part of your life.
A virtuous woman is God's masterpiece. As I think that the Catholics would say that our Lady is God's masterpiece, which is sort of the Platonic form of the virtuous woman. But yeah, I agree with you, and it's not. Yeah, you got to get out of this. No, men, nobody is going to bribe you with easy access to orgasm who has your interests at heart. That's going to be the tool of your enemies to control you, and men need to understand this. But I do really sympathize with Ben White's frustration with modern religious leaders. They're being taught in seminaries, they're just completely disconnected from the world as it is, and this is going to change slowly, but I don't know how it's going to. It needs to change a lot faster. This is like everything these days.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anyway, Adam Venable for $3 USA. I've recently started a relationship with a girl who I met online. The only problem is she lives about an hour away from me. Do you have any advice for long and mid-range dating? Well, go ahead. You want to answer this one first?
Yeah, I'd take this in two parts. One, I'd like to look at the situation and see, like, is the girl putting up roadblocks for that distance, and does that distance have a defined like end state or an ending date, as it were? Like, is it like it's just starting the new college semester, so has she moved away like for college, for a defined period of time? Are you guys you can't have a purely online relationship. It's impossible. You have to be in person. You have to, you have to have physical touch. You have to, learn what each other are like. Just texting each other leaves open a whole bunch of, misinterpretations. It's a horrible medium, for communicating with people. You need to. This is why, largely in the red pill community, we just say that long distance relationships are not relationships. But I would say that if there's like a defined like end state to that, you might be able to skirt by it. And if she's not putting up roadblocks to make it an attempt to go and see you, then maybe you're onto something. But generally in these kinds of situations, I don't know.
Online relationships are not relationships.
Yeah.
Long distance relationships are certainly relationships, because my wife and I were in a long distance relationship and we got married when we were not even living in the same country. So, I would say, Adam, the thing is, this more serious you are towards actually closing it out, like towards marriage, the more long distance relationships are going to work. If you're in your teens, you're not ready to talk about marriage, that's the long distance relationship is probably not going to work out super well for you. But if you were like me and this was like, okay, this is a prospect for marriage, then the long distance relationship isn't going to be a barrier as much, especially if you're in your 30s and well organized and capable of planning a weekend and rearranging your commitments. That's for adults gearing towards marriage, it's not a problem. For young people, oftentimes it's an excuse, and it becomes like what Redhawk was saying, just like this online thing that doesn't really exist. Relationships between men and women are necessarily physical and embodied. And without that component, it's I don't think it really works very well at all.
Yep, I generally agree.
Okay, well, I think I'll just, do you have anything more to say about long distance relationships? I don't know. I probably could talk for a very long time about this, but I'll just move on because we have a lot of super chats. Okay, Dreadnought. This reminds me of a tiny bit of your debate with Turd Flinging Monkey a few years ago. Re being Catholic. I think it's reasonable for Catholics to choose to be single, even without entering into religious life. That's what I'm doing. Anyway, here's some beer/diaper-mony. I hope you're doing very well. Well, I've been trying to switch from beer to wine. Not that I drink a lot at all, and I'm trying to not be in the position of needing diapers anymore. But thank you very much for the money. Let's see. Being single. I definitely respect the whole concept. We call this, I think, a consecrated single in Catholic life is where a person dedicates themselves to the single life. It's not an official vow, but it's some kind of less formal dedication that you can really easily be released, that you can not easily be released from, but you can be released from with some standard procedure. And people feel that this focuses them on being useful adults and useful individuals to the community. and to themselves. I'm really of the opinion that men need vows of some kind. The consecrated singlehood is a good way to pursue that, but I don't know, a guy that goes through his entire life without making a vow to something that's beyond himself, I think is missing out on what it means to properly mature.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I think the only thing I would add to that is that there's a difference between men going their own way and men being sent their own way. So, it's don't. I'd caution people saying like, "Oh, I'm gonna take up the single life." If you were sent that way because you couldn't attract the opposite sex, that's way different than actually making the rational choice to pursue something greater outside of yourself. It kind of goes back to our conversation earlier about like the 19-year-old Zoomer, bravely proclaiming his celibacy as some
Yeah.
kind of, virtue.
Yeah. I mean, celibacy is a virtue. People, I mean, to make this clear, it is. But don't go around as a teenager broadcasting that. That's not a manly way to express your dedication to principles. So anyway, but this is interesting because versus the men going their own way versus men being sent their own way, because I had, sort of someone super chat. They asked me a question about being an unattractive man who had some kind of physical issue, and the person that kind of came to my own mind was John Merrick. Have you heard of this person?
He's the Elephant Man?
The Elephant Man, right? And this is a person who was horrifically abused and suffered from a debilitating a mutation or illness that caused his body to be just absolutely twisted in ways that are just medically miraculous and horrific. And yet we remember him as being this kind of Renaissance man who, for a brief period when he was rescued from being a freak show act, was this a writer who this appreciator of the arts, this person who could frequent high society in Victorian times, and who had this kind of poetic soul. And I mean, someone that deformed can be so virtuous and stand above it all. I mean, it's just hope for all of us, I think.
Well, this is why I was stressing, and this gets back to the biggest issue of our time: is men are raised like defective women, and women, their main agency is their looks, because it's the main thing that guys are looking for in the opposite sex is attractiveness, youth, beauty, fertility. That's what guys look for, and men are raised to think that that's the exact same thing that women are looking for, and it's just simply not the case. Like obviously, like looks matter to women, but never on the same degree that they matter for men. So you can over-index in other traits, like maybe you're super masculine, you just bring that kind of energy that the woman needs, or maybe you have good finances, or or you're just funny, like
funny. I was gonna say, right?
Yeah, like how many comedians are unattractive and they just slay all the time, because they're hilarious guys. So yeah, don't think you're doomed just because you got a bad roll of the genetic dice here.
I always say this: a lot of guys, they this is one other thing about the manosphere stuff that I'm not saying. Obviously, I know you can do it well, and I'm sure you guys do, but they have this idea that like the only way you can succeed is be a Giga Chad, and so everyone tries to be Henry V when they should be trying to be Falstaff.
Yeah, it definitely is an issue, and again, like it's just like the meme going around the circles right now is the high value man, because like people don't want to use the term alpha male anymore, because it's been memed and stuff like that, and people are, the mainstream is picking up on it, so of course it died. But yeah, they definitely do preach that you got to be like the the guy who's making six figures and the guy who's 6 feet tall and stuff like this. Like there definitely is a faction of people that are pushing for that. But the red pill has to be for the everyman, and this is actually something that Rollo Tomasi has really been hammering on lately, is trying to figure out how can we get the red pill tactics into the hands of the everyman. It needs to be able to serve him the same ways it does like the playboy in Miami as it does to the farmer in Oklahoma. It needs to serve him the same way. So the sphere once again is shifting focus. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and if that's the objective, then the red pill tactics are going to have to be more about the good stuff that I like than the sort of tricks, because you can't onboard people to tricks, because they're it's like printing money. The currency, big people catch on. But anyway, I'm going to go on to the well, I should say also people should I mean, focus on what you want to get from women too. I always say that the most important thing is that she's open to religion and children. That would be my no antinatalists, no hardcore atheists, and no hardcore third wave feminists. Those would be my absolute. I mean, unless you're literally trying to pull off like taming of the shrew maneuver, and for some reason Zoomer women aren't challenging enough these days, and you want more challenges. But after that, like that's my number one thing. Like, you go for those things, women who are open to those things, or better yet, want them, and then you kind of work around that, and then you go for personality compatibility, and then looks. Like, those are the things that are that's how I would approach the problem, right? But values are so important, and
absolutely.
a lot of women don't have values, or they're vague about them. But
well, here's when I get into a little bit more of my misogyny. I don't believe that women can have values outside of a man. In my personal experience, it's always given to them by a male authority figure, whether it's a father, whether it's a man she's interested in, whatever it is. She got it from somewhere, and it wasn't through her own thought process. But
throw Jesus into one of those originators, and you've got a deal.
Totally fine.
But no, I mean, I think that's an exaggeration, but I know what you're getting at. And this is, there's a difference between a woman who's like feminist because that's just in the air, and a woman who's professing it because she's dedicated to it, or dedicated to antinatalism, which is another huge. That's actually even a worse one. That's something serious. That's just a big red flag. But anyway,
very much so. I do think that is a problem, though, especially with younger guys who think that they're going to find a complete woman. Again, men raised to think they're defective women. Women, they simply just don't care about men's struggles. They wait at the finish line and they pick a winner. But that's not how men look for women in relationships. You build a perfect woman. You don't find a perfect woman. There's no woman out there that has read all of Julius Evola's books and, has pronounced herself as, a savior of the white race and stuff like this. Like, like Murdoch Chan from Murdoch. Like, that doesn't exist. Like you go out and you make a good woman. You don't find one. So
I'm not even so sure Murdoch Chan is the perfect woman. Little psychotic for my tastes, but different strokes for different folks, I'm sure. And on that note, let me go on here. So Sam 153, always an interesting discussion, Dave. Will historians see this as one of the defining issues of our time, if not the most? I think that historians will see total and utter demographic collapse to be the defining issues of the time. And this issue of male-female relationships will be one of the three pillars holding up the total and utter demographic collapse of modern industrial society. So implicitly, yes. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be one of them. Like, we're definitely are going to have, we all see our replacement birth rates are significantly, dropping at this point. And, this leads into all sorts of other big issues of our time, like immigration, anti-whiteism, everything. So, all these pieces are connected together, and we're going to have to see how all these play out. But it definitely will be, a point in the history books. I wonder if 20 years down the road here, people are going to read in the textbook, and in 2010, the app called Tinder came out and it's still in use today or something like that.
No, they won't, because there will not be a human race if Tinder is still in use. And Tinder is literally, I of the opinion that Tinder and OnlyFans is literally destroying the human race, and they need to be just ended by responsible authorities in totally legal ways, citizens that don't involve anything that you disapprove of. It's a total mess. It's a total mess. The anti-white stuff in particular is, I think the demographic collapse is somewhat organic, but the anti-white stuff is, I think, a deliberate act of ideological wickedness that it dovetails sort of a natural instinct towards animal wickedness with a sort of literally demonic impulse for revenge that you have in certain populations. And it's to me, it's just, it's one of these things that's so deliberately concocted that I think that will go down as one of the big evils, because demographic collapse is bad, but it's also very obviously a product of technology in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we had a fantastic discussion last night on Yiz's Discord Dragon stream last night. We had a discussion on anti-whiteism. Everyone should go check that out. She's doing great work.
Well, actually, she's on my list of people to invite on. You were ahead of her, but I'm not disclosing the order of the list. But I'm trying to do live streams with everyone from the Soldings conference, and still hit my regulars like the Franklin. So, but I have limited time to do this. So, thank you very much, Sam153, for the super chat. We appreciate it. Ben White. I've heard many manosphere content creators say that men under 30 shouldn't focus on romantic relationships and instead should focus on gaining money or career. What are your thoughts? Oh, how about you take this one on first? I got my thoughts on this.
So this largely comes from a person who's really kind of pioneered this thought of thinking was Rollo Tomasi, and basically his thought process about this is that men's like peak sexual market value is typically in their 30s, because that's when they're if you're in your peak physical shape, if you have your finances in order, because getting your business in order, being self reliant on yourself, you're not off like the government dole or your parents' dole, which is more and more common these days. So basically that is where that thought process gets from, because women, number one, they are attracted to older men. They're attracted to men who have their shit together, and typically men get their shit together sometime in their 30s, just because it takes longer for guys to mature. Meanwhile, women's peak sexual market value is in their early 20s. That's when they're the most fertile. It's when they're the most attractive. That's when men always select, always from 20 to 60, men always find women most attractive 20 to 24. So basically that is the contention with a lot of these guys is get your house in order, as it were, have a strong foundation. And then when you have everything in order in your 30s, then you could start looking around for women in their 20s to settle down with. I largely agree with this. However, it does, of course, because there's so many fucking autists in the manosphere community, they take it to the nth degree. And basically this ties over into like MGTOW people, where they just say, oh, well, I'm just going to not focus on women at all for like that 15-year period. And it's like, well, that's how you get taken advantage of. That's how you find a predatory chick. And, that's when you get into issues. So you have to, women should never be the primary focus of your life. They should be something you understand and are working towards, in addition to whatever it is that you're striving for, whether it's a business, whether it's, whatever it might be. You need to understand women in addition to it, but they should not be your focus. And this is the biggest problem with the pickup artists of the 90s, like your, Royce, Mystery, Neil Strauss, Roosh, like all those guys. So I think it's true to an extent, but you shouldn't just swear off girls for 15 years and focus on your business. No, just do them all at once.
Yeah, for a collectively minded person like myself, this is such a tempting solution to the problem, because there was a woman, I don't remember this person's name. She's some kind of right-wing European woman who was complaining loudly on Twitter the other day that she has so many kind of less attractive friends who are nonetheless very good catches from a wife material point of view. And she can't pair them off because they're so super shy. And, what are guys doing? Like, get out there, and these women, like, how do I get these women paired off? And as a person who thinks that we desperately need to get single women cleared out of the marketplace and into either convents or altars for marriage ASAP, I was very sympathetic with this perspective. And the solution is, it just, from a systems point of view, the solution is like, well, why don't just the awkward men marry these awkward women when the awkward men are like 37 and these awkward women are 26? That's like the perfect match.
Yeah, to an extent, the issue you're having there is that the guys don't approach because they haven't been taught and they don't know like their own game. And then the girls, as we were mentioning earlier, they have no girl game, so they have no idea how to like make themselves available, as it were.
Yeah, but like, these are awkward girls. I mean, like they're not. No, I mean, you can see girls who don't have girl game in Jane Austen. They existed and they still got married off, right? I mean, it is remarkable how much Zoomer flirtation has completely cratered. But I've got no girl game can't translate into I can't get married. That's not healthy.
No,
Society should be able to get these women,
it's
a
true.
husband.
It's true. I really try my best to not give advice to women, just simply because they just live in a completely different world than I do. Their experience of things is totally different. And largely, whenever a guy gives advice to a girl on how to be a good girl, he's just trying to train her to be a good girl for him, and that's not
Yeah.
necessarily going to work for everything in general. Um, a person who I'm good friends with on Twitter, who's doing fantastic work in this space, is my friend Allie Drummond from Real Femme Sapien. She runs her own channel, and she kind of focuses a lot on these like kind of like awkward, girls and stuff like that who don't know like girl game and stuff like that. And she's 27 and she's recently married to an older man, stuff like that. And that's a big portion of her content. So I could point people in her direction. It's one thing. I generally try and say like the women are going to be the ones that have to fix the women, and the men are going to be the ones to fix the men.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely. Yeah, women give terrible dating advice. Even sort of reasonably aware red pill women give terrible dating advice because they always presuppose your ability to be attractive to women, which is the last thing you want to presuppose. Mm-hmm. Like it's the last thing you want to presuppose because most guys are suffering from a lack of ability to be self-assured and attractive to women to begin with. And women always assume that you already have that, which is why they give terrible dating advice. They give advice on how to be a good husband, which is
exactly.
Again, it's the same problem you're saying. I genuinely struggle with this question because if I tell you I would just say as a young guy, just calm down about relationships. But at the same time, just always I tell young guys to just flirt all the time, but don't do anything immoral from a Catholic point of view. But I would say always be always able to flirt, but never worry that you're not getting a girlfriend.
You should be
on. But
you should be charming. Yeah, you should
be charming. But of course, do young men flirt anymore? Is that even a thing after COVID? I don't know.
This is not really. But
in order to give good advice, so in order to give good advice, I need to be aware of what the social outlets are, because what you want to do is you want to kind of keep a stick in the fire, and you want to keep your charm. You want to sort of sharpen your axe in the charm department, and you never want to lose track of that. And you also don't want to go socially insane. You don't want to lock yourself into. A lot of guys do this. They try to throw themselves into their job, and then that goes south, and then they completely destroy themselves doing that. That's, in my opinion, not a very good idea. So you need to kind of balance it out, but just don't beat yourself up if things don't work out in your early 20s.
Exactly. Again, I keep stressing this, and it really is the biggest point in the whole thing. Men being raised like defective women. Again, men think they have a timeline that is similar to women's. It's just not the case. If you don't have a relationship in your 20s, you're totally fine. In your 30s, you can easily date 20-year-old girls if you have your shit together. This is a staple throughout all of history. It's what women are attracted to. They always date older men. So just don't stress out about it. And if you're nervous about a approach and stuff like that, one of the things I always recommend to guys, a great place to start is just be social with people who are already sociable for their jobs. Waitresses, bartenders, cashiers, anything like that. Just strike up a conversation with those people. And it doesn't even have to be, flirtatious. You just need to learn how to be charming through trial and error and things like that.
Yeah, for instance, cashiers are a great example of this, but you just ask them how their day is going and see how that plays out. If you get into the habit of doing that it's like a muscle. You have to stress your ability to be personable as a muscle. And that's the one risk of just not dating or not engaging with women in your 20s, is that your muscle is going to degrade in that department. But you can build it back up again. It's not a big problem at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Caleb for $5 USA. I don't know if I'm calling out the values or not. RH. Can society ever? I don't know. Or Redhawk. Can society ever order itself such that men are best served by marrying early with no pickup artist phase? What markets could you look for? Can a timeless curriculum for young men reliably prepare them?
I think the only way that that would really work for you is if you had like a strong, tight knit community with social norms enforced upon both men and women, crucially. And this is a big problem with society today is that there are no social norms enforced on women at all, but all social norms are attempted to be enforced on men. But I think that would be the only case in which that would really work out for you. You know, something like a tight knit, I don't know, I'm a little out of my league here because I'm not in like these religious communities as much as I used to be, you know, these really tight knit ones. So it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I would imagine that that would be the circumstance in which you would potentially have those things. But then comes to question how you can attract women into that space when all those institutions are now gone, which they largely are in the West.
Yeah, this is a conundrum. This in the abstract, your question is absolutely yes. Any healthy society will direct men in a course where 70 to 80% will be able to end up with some woman by the end of their life in a monogamous relationship. And the hypergamy will only shave off the bottom 10 to 15. But, you know, hopefully through celibacy and not through horrific death and war, but, you know, who can promise what? But the problem is that everyone knows that stable situation is necessary. Everyone knows that it's technically possible, but bridging that gap of how to practically get from here to there is dicey. The religious communities work, but they also tend to be a little bit touch and go because people move away and move around way too much. But I don't know. I'm wondering if there can't be healthy pockets of this stuff that appear in various areas.
Yeah, it could be. It'd be. I know a lot of guys in our community are trying to work towards that, and you know, maybe we'll see something like that form. I'd be in support of that. We're just gonna have to see.
Actually, you reminded me of a question I wanted to put to you, Redhawk, that I didn't actually get to. What So periodically in right-wing spheres, people try this with some success. What do you think of sort of the whole matchmaker idea? This idea that the way that we need to proceed is to literally have some third-party arbiter arrange dates for people and go from there, and to take the menu option where you're scrolling. I mean, even in religious dating sites that have regulations on premarital sex, you're still, you know, scrolling through photos, right? A lot
Yeah,
of people have mentioned that the only way to solve this is to have some third party arbiter, some, you know, some Gentile version of the Yenta go through and literally go, oh hey, you know, you're in sort of the same ballpark of attractiveness of this other person and a good match. Go for a date, report back to me. And that's sort of the solution on a macrocosmic level, because that could be translated to the online sphere. But at the
yeah,
same time, it would sort of avoid the problem that the apps have.
yeah. I think the problem is it's again, it sounds good in the abstract. I think the issue with doing that online is that just by the nature of it being online, you're going to be exposed to the other like nasty parts of, you know, the internet culture and dating culture that are attached to that. I don't think you could just, you know, like section yourself off in this one area without being exposed to, oh well, there might be a better option over here. You know, it's I think the better bet is just for men. You just need to be better men. Like you need to be what women are looking for. Women are the sexual selectors. Like fucking live with it. You know, at the end of the day, and what they want is changing. It used to be more beta bucks provisioning, and now it's more like on the alpha fuck side of things. So like, get your attitude in order, get your fitness in order, and then have your provisioning on the side. But you know, you just have to change. You know, it's adapt or die.
Is it really that hard to be West Elm Caleb? Oh, was that such a high? I'm just saying, right? I mean, we're not talking
um,
about John Juan here.
yeah,
We're talking about West Elm Caleb, right?
you
That
know,
didn't strike
you
me.
know his, you know
Sure.
his
Yeah.
case is an interesting one. I mean, he's definitely in the minority of people that would use the apps. Like he you know, professionally well taken photos. He knew how to text game very well. He's definitely very much in the minority of people, you know, on in those circumstances. It's definitely not easy to do. If it was easy to do, then you know we wouldn't have the massive differences in swipe to date rates that you know, guys have on dating apps versus what women do. It's like a good book to read about this. My buddy Aaron Clary, he wrote this book called The Book of Numbers, and basically it was an actuary study of dating apps. Essentially, is what it was, and he basically averaged everything out to basically making a guy an average Joe Blow. Like 5 on attractive scale, 5 on money, and stuff like this. And basically, when he averaged it out, it took him over 35,000 swipes on Tinder to result in 5 dates. That's not 5 matches, but 5 dates when the chick would actually show up. Because if anyone's in the game today, the flake rate is around 60 to 70%. Of women just like not showing up. So that's the issue. Like, it's very, very difficult to be very successful on these apps. It's quite literally feast or famine.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, this is beyond the scope of this question, but Alex Kashida had an interesting take on this, where she pointed to so much of the West End Caleb success was a projected mood of this sort of post indie, post professional millennial man. But again, we're going to get into a rabbit hole, so I'm going to move on here. Oh, was that last question? It was literally from Caleb. So maybe it was a Caleb from West Elm. Yiz the Eunuch. Great stream, guys. Thank you both. Now, question to both of you. A major issue on this topic is masculine, non-white foreign men are being mass imported into our lands, and our women are being coerced from birth to desire them. What can we do? What should we do? What can we do, and what should we do? Is this more of a problem in Europe? Because the major immigration communities into North America are from like Mexico and Latin America and Asia, which by and large, I wouldn't describe this community as this sort of like turbo testosterone fueled. They're just like, I think there are a lot of problems with matching in America. But maybe this is more of a problem in like Sweden with like a lot of these more aggressive sexual cultures from the Middle East playing a more aggressive dating game. That might be a problem there. It's not really where I come from.
Yeah, there's kind of two things here. Like, it's definitely a problem because imported guys from the third world are just more rugged because of the conditions versus like the affluence of the West. So they generally do tend to exhibit more like alpha qualities. That doesn't, again, alpha doesn't mean good and beta doesn't mean bad. It's just the fact on the ground. However, for a white pill for this scenario, one good thing that's come out of all like the dating apps and stuff like this is that we've had data that we've never had access to before, and we can actually look at this stuff. And white men are still the most desired race across all the board. So everyone wants a white man at the end of the day.
You definitely have your finger more on the pulse of the stats in this instance, but I'll just from personal experience, I've seen a lot of new immigrants from the Philippines, and I didn't feel like I was being, my masculine presence was being overpowered by a rugged man. Although, I've encountered some rugged Filipinos, but I don't know. I guess maybe I just come from a community where this particular issue is not an issue. One thing that was a problem immediately that was in refugee communities, like 90% of those guys are like men in their 20s. I don't know how big those communities are or if they would even be large enough to skew a dating pool, but that definitely is a problem in terms of gender balance. It's sort of like the inverse effect of World War II, like you were saying.
Yeah, I think another thing here too that you're mentioning, and this is just a really good point in general for any relationship advice with women. If it's an issue for you, it's going to be an issue for her. So if like you make yourself seem like threatened by your masculinity by some African moving into your community, then she's going to perceive that as an issue for you as well. So if you just stick to your guns, stick to your game, become attractive, don't be unattractive, it shouldn't be an issue for you.
Stand up for yourself and don't apologize unless you've actually done something wrong. Your apologies are like a currency, and if you overuse them, they become meaningless. And they also, and when they're used incorrectly, they project weakness.
Yes.
And so like you really have to learn. This is what progressive men never learn. And I some progressive men are successful sexually, but it's for other reasons that are kind of equally pathetic. So Nirvana in an apt tweet super chat says, please read Ephesians 5, chapter 5, verse 24. The most important lesson I have learned about women is that they are servants of the heart, and it is only when they can sacrifice themselves fully for a man or a child that they are content, or that she is content. Well, I 100% agree with you. I would actually say that neither men nor women are satisfied unless they can fully dedicate themselves to something that's beyond themselves. Ultimately, that will be God, but more temporarily, I would say the main difference is that temporarily, women always have to dedicate themselves to a person, and men are much more content with dedicating themselves to something that is abstract.
Yeah, like an ideal.
Like an ideal or a philosophy, or something like that, or even something that's an object in the real world, like a railroad, to take like an Ayn Rand example, right? But yeah, I don't know. I would agree with that. What would you say?
Yeah, I very much agree with that as well. Largely, like women's agency comes from attaching herself to a man, whether that's a political movement that is started by men, or ideally a husband, or or her father when she's growing up, or something like that. And then men, you cannot have a successful relationship if you make the girl the number one thing in your life. It doesn't work that way. It's not something that she's going to follow. If she's the number one, you have to commit yourself to whatever it is. If it's your job, your faith, your cause, ideology, whatever it is, you have to commit yourself something outside of her.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's also what a lot of guys do, is they start orbiting around women that they're dating, and it's there's a difference between being dedicated to a woman in the way that she needs, and then being dedicated to her in sort of a fandom relationship. And that distinction is very, very subtle. There are the most masculine men in the entire world have dedicated themselves to queens, to our Holy Mother, and to feminine figures, and they've done so in the most masculine way possible. But it doesn't look like the whole orbiter type deal. And I probably could write an essay on the difference, but it's a very subtle difference between those two things. They look alike superficially.
Yeah, very much so. Two things to add there, and then we can keep scrolling through these super chats. I know we're going long, but again, and I've been pointing this out the whole stream, men raised like defective women, thinking that they have to orbit themselves around a chick, which is a woman's mating strategy, is to orbit themselves around a man entirely and give themselves to the man. And in addition to that, this kind of addresses like the simp question, and the main differentiation between like a simp and then like a muse, I guess, using a woman as a muse or something like that, is a position of strength. The simp is categorized by not being in a position of strength with the woman. He's trying to qualify himself to her, largely for absolutely nothing. But it's not simping for a sculptor to form or a painter, like a Da Vinci to paint a Mona Lisa or whatever it may be. Comes from a position of strength.
Yeah, I mean, you want, your desire for a woman should turn her into, it should not turn her into a tyrant, it should turn her into a lens. And the lens is the lens of virtue. That's what the Virgin Mary says. I magnify the Lord. When you're supposed to take care of her, but you're not supposed to. This fan relationship that emerges in these places like OnlyFans it's like a textbook on what not to do.
Yes, yeah, it's so dark. Yeah,
I see these things that are posted on social media, and I literally can't believe my eyes. But I'm going to keep on going. This is equally depressing super chat from Darth Calhoun. He says, in the armed forces, it is dominated by hedonistic men who only care about body count. It's hard to have a serious conversation about virtue, true happiness, and marriage with my fellow soldiers. I feel mixed opinions about this, because the army is super degraded, but men don't really. I mean, when men joke around, they joke around about things like body count. And even if you are dedicated, as you should be, to a life of chastity in the Christian tradition, I think you need to be able to kind of like take it lightly in these situations and understand. Yeah, read the room sounds like I'm trying to game it. I'm just saying, like,
no, you're true.
Be in a position where, like, you can kind of participate, and it's not like, you're going to give them a lecture on theology. I mean, there's a place for evangelization in serious conversations, but I think those have to occur in a different situation than in, like,
not in a hyper
locker rooms.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. Like, you want to find people. Like, I'm sure that the army has really been degraded in terms of morality, and I think that oftentimes, men probably shouldn't talk about body count at all. I think that's kind of, but at the same time, it kind of does come up even in traditional circles. That, I mean, I'm thinking of 19th century literature about men talking about this among themselves. Like, body humor is a aspect of soldiery always, and I want to kind of match my idealism for hoping for a completely virtuous soldiery, and then matching that to my understanding that body humor and raucous behavior has been a part of these situations since the beginning of time, and there's got to be a way to walk that line.
Well, it's also that men go through phases too of life as well. It's when you're young and dumb and stuff like that, and then as opposed to when you get older and stuff like that, you focus on different things. Like especially in your in like a warrior caste, like soldiers and stuff like that. I think you're going to be really hard pressed to find extreme Catholic virtue in a position like that, but. No,
there's got to be a way that you can live in a degenerate society, or in these degenerate situations, and take your own dedication to virtue lightly. I know I'm really walking a tightrope, and I'm not trying to commend sin, but there's got to be situations where that can kind of be decentered a little bit, and you're like, okay, I'm in this situation, and I'm just rolling with the culture of of this. And I don't know. I don't want to say, like, degrade yourself by giving into these impulses at all, but there's a balancing act that needs to go on here. That's probably outside the scope of this conversation. Though, Darth Cluhoon, my sympathies, because we all know that the modern military is in a really sad state, and I hate to hear about it. So, thank you for your super chat. So 2 from Hammerhead. The first one says, a big fan of this conversation. Thank you. And the second one says, currently enjoying the birth of my 4th daughter at age 29, going to have 8 like Radleb. Well, I am in complete admiration of you, Red Hammerhead. That is a great number to have 4 children. That's, I come from a long line of small families, so I don't have very big shoes to fill. But,
yeah, he's a frequent on some of my Man's Hour streams. He's a good guy. So,
good guy.
Congratulations.
Well, man, I am in total admiration of people with large families. I hope to expand. Well, I don't want to talk about my own ambitions for family, but I'm in very much admiration of you, Red Hammerhead. Having a large family is a huge achievement, and especially in this age, it's an act of heroism against the prevailing order in so many different ways. It's just a strike against everything that's evil and cheap in our world.
Yeah, and he's Hammerhead's got his head on a swivel. He's read a bunch of like Roland Tomasi's books and stuff like that. He knows what he's doing. He's a good guy.
Roland Tomasi. Well, I know vaguely of him, but I think he became prominent right when I was getting out of this whole.
He was a moderator on the SoSwap forums for about 10 years, from like 2002 to 2013, and that's 2013 is when his first book came out, The Rational Male. It's basically now been referred to as the Bible of the Manosphere at this point. It's a very, very good book. He now has 5 of them. I'd actually be very curious, Dave, for you to read the 4th book. The 4th book is called A Rational Male Religion, and it goes through all the different major religions of the West, and then he also takes a look at Confucianism, Shinto, like all these other kinds of things, and he basically just dissects like what feminism is doing to it, what the relationships between men and women were like in the past and stuff like that. It's a very interesting read.
Oh, well, I had to make queue, but it's a little bit of a long reading queue at this stage.
No, for sure. Yeah, you're busy.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one here is one thing that, so Ben White says, one thing from the manosphere that really stuck with me is that men always pay for women, whether it's marriage, dating, cohabitation, or even prostitution. What's your takeaway from this? Do you want to?
It's a, I mean, it is a fact, and it is like there is a growing number of, are you familiar with the site Seeking Arrangement, Dave?
No, I'm not. Is it like women looking for sugar daddies kind of deal?
Yeah, essentially yes. And there's a lot of guys. Aaron Clary, one prominent manosphere guy, is predicting that essentially is going to be the future of the dating apps, because it's pretty much the only way that guys are actually going to be successful on them. So he's predicting that. So Seeking Arrangement has a $1,000 barrier to entry for guys, but women can get on there for free. And so that's the adage that you always pay for it. It is true that you're paying for it, like in some way, of course, but is that a way for advocate for prostitution? I don't think that's healthy for a society, even though like that statement like is true on its face. But I think what people abstract from that, gets into some pretty dark places. I know like people like Delicious Tacos and some more, even like people around like the app sphere are really big into like prostitutes and stuff like that. It,
You're not going to build a civilization.
No, you're not. You're not. But
no one has ever. It's the oldest profession in the world, and no one has ever built a lasting society on that.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely not something to build a society off of. But it is interesting to read some of the accounts of people like Delicious Tacos, or even like when BAP talks about it, because like they're. I want to be careful of what I say here, but it's kind of like when you're just so through with playing the field and you're so focused on doing other things, but you really just want to like, basically transcend women, but you still want to get your rocks off. This is one way to doing it. I can understand why some guys want to go down that route, or also if you want to keep a population of sexless men at the very bottom from rebelling against you.
Sure.
But I do not think that I wouldn't encourage people to do it. I mean, I'll say on this stream,
this is the irritating Catholic in me. Sorry to cut you off, but like if you're trying to transcend women, are you really transcending women if you're paying $1,000 to get your rocks off?
Yeah,
it doesn't sound to be a very transcendental transaction to me.
Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, like it's like a misanthropic part of like the red pill, I guess you can call it. And it's kind of like, I'm interested in it just for like the thought exercises of people like in my space of things. But like, do I think like I should be advocating for it? Everyone should go out and do it? No, I don't think it's a very good idea, but it is something that piques my interest a little bit, just, because like it's the circles I swim in. So
yeah, the barrier to entry that you have to pay through, that might be a way to solve the problem. Like a paid fee to entry for a matchmaker might be, I could see that being, the thing is, it has to be sort of a paid barrier to entry, and it can't be quid pro quo, because once you get women thinking in the quid pro quo thing, that's just like, they're never going to have children, like, because you can't sell children to people as quid pro quo. You just can't.
Yeah, very much so.
So,
I mean, there are cases of career women who just want to like get to the point and are too busy to go out and date, and they will put themselves on Seeking Arrangement. And there are cases of people in red pill spaces who have found relationships on these things that have lasted. I don't think it's, it'd be foolish for me to say that like the anecdote therefore is perfect example as to why this should be encouraged. Like, I mean, we're gonna see where this ends up. I mean, I do predict this is gonna become more commonplace, but yeah, I don't
know. I mean, I always hear these stories about women who are sacrificing families to be professionals in cities, and
yeah,
it makes me despair, because I just think, I mean, probably for every 10 women who do this, probably one of them, like, that's generous, probably 1 out of 30 is going to have a successful enough career to be impressive to people after that career, such that they'll actually like give her deference. And for everyone else, it's going to be like, okay, you're 40 and you're a junior manager, I don't give a shit. It's going to be really like, that conclusion is going to fall hard on people, really hard.
Yeah, that's going to be the true issue of our time when millennial women. There's a fantastic study that Morgan Stanley put out 2 years ago, just before the coup. They titled it "Rise of the She Economy," and they all these hedge funds are moving money around in anticipation for by 2030, 50% of working women, that's between ages of 20 and 40, are going to be single and childless in the West. So all the hedge funds are moving money around in anticipation for this. So if 50% of the women aren't getting married, that means 50% of the guys aren't either. So that's a pretty dark future for us in the next 10 years here.
Yeah, that just means our society will die and we'll have to continue on in microcosm if at all. But anyway, thank you very much. The next one is Yiz Eunuch for $3. Modernity conditions women to have casual sex, multiple partners, careers, no kids, etc. If men are raised to be defective women, women are raised to be homosexual men. 100% satanic inversion. That's true. I mean, someone posted this online. I can't remember what platform, where it was this picture of this woman who she was speaking in this way, and it was like she was obviously female. She's not trans or something, but like you could tell that she was taught to speak this way by listening to gay men and not listening to other women, and it was really jarring. And I don't know. This is interesting. The extent to which gay male culture has colonized female imaginations is kind of insane.
Yeah, we have Sex in the City to thank for that.
Yeah, was that the first?
Probably.
Like that was a big step forward. It was all these sitcoms that came out. Women be like gay men, or something. And I don't know. Sex in the City probably was the first real one to do that.
Yeah, and in some ways, I mean, there is like a blue pill for women as well that unfortunately they have been taught and given this mental framework that the way to attract a man is by exhibiting all the male attraction cues, like, oh, I'm confident, I'm assertive, I'm a hard worker, I've built this business for myself. Well, where are all the men? And unfortunately for women in that case, because they've been lied to their whole entire lives, because there's no incentive for men to tell them the truth. Men just simply are attracted to that. Like, there's not a single man on planet Earth that cares how much money a woman makes. It's just not what we're attracted to. It's like a bonus.
There's two levels. There's the women who have realized they have priced themselves out of the mating market, and there's a second level where the women are going to realize that their jobs aren't worth as much as families are when it comes down to conceptualizing value among different women. But anyway, yeah. I don't know if I have really any more to say about that, but thank you very much for the super chat or the entropy chat. Dreadnought for $10. I can't really see the MGTOW movement as being all that useful a label or a thing to associate with. In my experience, most of them spend a lot of time complaining about women. I do think that men do need to make decisions about the increased effort to create a relationship versus the costs. Well, I agree with all of that. MGTOW seems kind of like a dead movement, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, more or less. Like, all the true ones are out actually doing their own thing as opposed to complaining on the internet. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about actually going your own way and then being sent your own way. And most of these guys have been sent their own way, and then they just adopt it as a personality trait.
Yeah. So like the incel thing, it's kind of
very much so.
Although I'm kind of surprised that incel it literally became a community. Like people, it used to be sort of a label of derision, and then it became a community somewhere in there.
Because there's so many of them. Young guys are having less sex than ever. And it's only increasing.
Yeah. Young women are actually having, I think, less sex on average as well. But if it hits women, it will hit men. I should say the bottom half of men.
Yeah,
3 times as hard, right?
Yeah, women's sexless rate is going up, but it's almost at a men is almost 2-to-1 ratio as to how much the numbers have changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, okay, Dreadnought since the super chat says, well, I just read that one. I apologize. Okay, one last one for Red Hammerhead for $3. I feel a kinship with Dave, having grown up in California and spent the final part of my career in Portland. Well, that's true, although right now I'm on the East Coast. But I was in the Pacific Northwest when I met my wife. So there's that. But thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if there's a question there, so I'm just going to go on since we're over time. Ben White, he asks, earlier you two talked about the deleterious effect of apps like Instagram, well, mainly OnlyFans and Tinder. However, I use Instagram to filter out girls I consider asking out, like super promiscuous or the pro-abortion ones. So I guess what he's saying is he looks them up on Instagram and sees what they're posting, and if they're
This is a I've actually gotten fights with guys on Twitter about this recently. Is that it's really really difficult to judge a woman just on the pictures and stuff like that. I mean, it's one thing if she's got like the bright purple hair and tattoos on her face and walking around with like an anti-Trump sign or something like that. That's one thing, but you just have to accept the fact that most women, if not all, the vast majority of them are basically like default leftists or default apolitical. So you, again, guys, you mold a woman, you don't find one. So like you should definitely spend some time with her and see if she falls in your frame and things like this. That's way better judge of her character than just seeing what she posts online, because they're basically all the same.
Default apolitical and default feminists are way different than dyed-in-the-wool ones. And so, I mean, I think what Ben White's saying is he uses this as sort of to filter out the absolute red flags, which you can do. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I guess the question is for me is you should target your dating search a little bit more so that filtration step isn't as necessary, I guess. I mean, you don't see a lot of on the religious dating sites, for instance, you're not going to encounter any pro-abortion women, and very few turbo feminists. Very, very few turbo feminists. So, you'll encounter a lot of apolitical women, but I don't know. I think that, there's a lot of men for the first time need to do a lot of filtration to save their time, and I don't know. I think this needs to be done differently than trying to Google search people, but maybe there's a better solution in the works in the technical forums that you read.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we use to mitigate a lot of the stuff, I mean, we often say just book multiple dates because, like, as I was saying earlier, like 7 times out of 10, the chick just isn't going to show up anyway. So, like, we're largely, like, if you're going to do the dating app thing, we suggest just casting the widest net possible, and then filtering out people that you catch afterwards, as opposed to doing like a sniper method, a sniper technique, because if you're doing like the sniper stuff, you're going to sink so much more time into it than you really have. And then you're still dealing with the exact same flake rate as before. So generally we say cast a wider net. If you're going to do online stuff, it's much easier to do like sniper tactics if you're in like a social setting, or you're like in a bar, or you have like a group of friends or something like that. Like in-person game, it's much easier to do that. But if you are going to do online stuff, just cast a wider net.
Yeah, it's hard because you just point to the fact that the online is incentivizing you to do the thing that in a different context would be the exact opposite. So, but that's just all these little perverse incentives that have wormed their way into our discourse. But anyway, Nirvana for $3. No men who think deeply about women retain a high opinion of them. Men either despise women or they have never thought seriously about them. Sex and Character by Otto Wagner.
Yeah. That book is on Skeptical Ways' channel, by the way. Guys can listen to.
Again, I understand what you're pointing to, but is this basically you're doing the inverse of what Redhawk was complaining about? You're looking at women as defective men. Once you understand that women aren't men, then you're not going to think about them this way. You're not going to go like, oh wow, she doesn't think like I do about problems, so she's not supposed to.
Yeah, exactly. You can't view women for what they can't be. She's not your friend, she's not your best friend, she's your woman, And women are different than men. They speak differently, they think differently, they act differently. And again, men raised to think like women. It's everything's just all so screwed up. You just don't expect things out of her that she can't provide. She can't be your emotional rock. That's what your job is. If you're having like major emotional problems, you go to your guy friends for that. Your woman isn't equipped to handle them.
Women can help with some emotional problems, but some she can't, and actually a lot of them she can't.
Yes,
and so
not only can she not do it, it makes her think you as weak for doing so, and almost puts like a guilt on her, like, oh, now you're giving me this information for me to feel guilty about, and I can't do anything about it. Why you're doing this to me?
Yeah, well,
why are you giving me
I made
anxiety?
mistakes like it. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll give you this example, and this is actually not necessarily a weakness thing, but I've noticed that if I'm really angry about something that happens politically, if you project that, like, it scares women, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very
and
much
so like they're not like their thought process is not like, oh well, you have this emotional problem, therefore you're weak. That's again, that's like judging. That's, you're superimposing the female psychology onto men, or of men onto women. Their thought process is, you're having this emotion, and in my case, I think it's more often anger than anything else, right? Like, I'm frustrated at something politically and despairing over the state of the world. They perceive that as fear, and then then they go like, oh, well, I'm threatened, I'm afraid, I want my man to protect me. But if he's in an emotional state where he's not feeling protective of me, oh, I'm even more afraid. And then that this cycles through.
It's a feedback loop.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop, and they keep on trying to reach to you for their fear response. And if you're not able to confront that, then like that causes an emotional crisis that you're sort of the source of. Mm-hmm. And again, once you cast it in terms of like filtering women through, like, oh, she thinks you're weak, that's not how her brain's processing it.
True, but it's just how you speak to guys to get it through in their heads, like, to make them understand the process.
Yeah, true. Yeah, so anyway, well, we're at the end of the super chats, and we are about half an hour over time, but it's been a really good conversation, actually. I think we agree on a lot, and again, I think we're mainly just difference in emphasis and focus, and probably religious persuasion as well. But I think the general perspective on the problems with the post-sexual revolution world are kind of, I think, pretty much a consensus.
Yeah. I think this was a fantastic conversation, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm really happy we finally sat down to do this, because it's been a long time coming.
Yeah. Jim, just before you leave, remind people you're on YouTube, Substack, and Twitter. Those are your three venues?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I'm really bad at remembering to put links in, but probably in a few hours, I'll get around to putting the links into the description here. And thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave.
All right, have a wonderful night, people, and a blessed rest of the week. Good night.